Would you consider trading me that book for my copy of the Scarlet book? No! No! Alright, yep.
Oh, what is it? Party!
This is great.
I'm so happy, lucky me. I just go my way, living every day. I don't worry don't agree. Things that bother you never bother me. Things that bother you never bother me. I feel happy, I'm fine, living in the sunlight, loving in the moonlight, having a wonderful time. Having got a lot, I don't need a lot. Coffee's only a dime. Living in the sunlight, loving in the moonlight, having a wonderful time. Just take it from me, I'm just as free as any daughter. I do what I like, just what I like, and how I love it. I'm right here to stay when I'm old gray. I'll be right in my prime. Living in the sunlight, loving in the moonlight, having a wonderful time. Just take it from me, I'm just as free as any daughter. I do what I like, just what I like, and how I love it. I'm right here to stay when I'm old and grey. I'll be right in my prime. Living in the sunlight, loving in the moonlight, having a wonderful time.
Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's been out for over a year now, and it's still, well, pretty much the same game. A lot has happened since launch in my 7-hour video essay on the game, however. Most notably, the new content released up until January 11th of this year, which appears to be the final content update. So, we're back with the everything that's happened since my initial video essay, as well as some things that I felt were genuinely interesting and worth talking about, that led to me deciding that this essay was worth making in the first place. Before we get into the DLC though, there's been a fair bit about the story of these video games worth mentioning since launch. Firstly, I'd like to give a big shout out to ND Music. They make some awesome compositions and you should check them out. Reason I'd like to do that is because that's more than the Pokemon Company could bother when their Pokemon Presents covering the DLC plagiarized ND Music's work by including one of their compositions without credit or permission. Because of that, we're going to use ND Music's work for the accompanying soundtrack to this entire first chapter. So you get a lot of examples of what their work is like in case you want to check them out. These Pokemon Presents were later deleted and re-uploaded with different music. As far as I could find, there was no apology or a statement at all from Pokemon on this matter, because legally, any derivative work of yours belongs to them. They can do whatever they want with it, with or without your permission, even forcing you to take it down if they don't like it. So, if you're a creator whose work gets yoinked by the Pokemon Company to further sell their product, or you're making a free fan game the Pokemon Company worries might hurt the sales of their games so they order you to take it down, there's really not much you can do about it. I also can't help but find the irony here when compared to a later bit of Pokemon controversy, and that's the release of Palworld. The moment this game dropped, people noticed some similarities to Pokemon, and ideas like the models themselves were just copied and changed a bit, or the models were made using AI started spreading like wildfire.
That's a nice argument, Senator. Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
None of these were true, but Twitter being Twitter, or X-Twitter, whatever, these became prevailing narratives for a while. And the whole debate of Palworld plagiarized or Palworld didn't plagiarize became the thing being talked about on the internet for a while. So, an indie studio most people have never heard of releases a game which gameplay-wise plays completely differently from Pokemon, being more of a survival game like Ark without needing 400 gigabytes of space, with creature catching elements and elements of micromanagement games like Factorio. And because some of the models are similar to that of the highest grossing media IP, it's going to get wrapped in controversy, with countless accusations of plagiarism, and even straight up lies being spread about the origins of the models being altered copies or AI generated. But when the highest grossing media IP itself proven plagiarizes from a small creator most people have never heard of, it gets a little attention for a while, then it's like it never happened. It probably also helps matters in this case that the Pokemon Company issued no official statement on the matter and silently changed the presentation later. But isn't that ironic though, and shows just how much brand loyalty such an established IP like this has? A small studio might have copied Pokemon? Get 'em! Tear 'em apart! Spread lies about 'em! Pokemon 100% proven stole from a small creator? Eh. Also, as an aside in regards to this specific Pokemon Presents with the plagiarized work, there was a Mew and Mewtwo event that was creatively named Get Mew and Mewtwo, and I just have to say one of my favorite remarks in regards to it was, Get Mew and Mewtwo is the best name for an event. Can't wait for the Receive Nondescript Pokemon event in 2024. One of Nintendo's biggest games released in 2023, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. This game had been basically done well over a year before it launched, but Nintendo decided to take a full extra year just to polish and release it in the best state they could. Look at Pokemon meanwhile, and their internal discussions around the same time are apparently, how can we keep the quality up while maintaining the same release schedule? This really reinforces to me that while the Pokemon IP is technically under Nintendo, its direction is mostly managed by the Pokemon Company and Game Freak, as Pokemon's stances towards their releases are so vastly different compared to Nintendo's. Not Scarlet and Violet, but Detective Pikachu Returns released, which, if I had infinite time, would get a video essay of its own. I still haven't even had enough time to do that Xenoblade 3 one I said I was going to do in the Scarlet and Violet essay. While the mainline Pokemon Switch titles have had questionable quality, does he just walk you on it like it's crap? Oh my god, that's not how water works! The spin-offs have typically remained pretty darn awesome, with my personal favorite being Rescue Team DX. Detective Pikachu Returns, however, had graphics rivaling Pokemon Scarlet and Violet.
Finally, a worthy opponent. Our battle will be legendary.
It even looked arguably worse than its 3DS counterpart, with cutscene quality that was a significant downgrade from the first title.
The real culprit is
Oh my
right here
god.
with us.
What do you mean?
And a story that was just the movie, but not good.
Who took advantage of my plan?
This is a game made by Creatures Inc., the company who's long been responsible for the Pokemon modeling, including in Scarlet and Violet. While the Pokemon modeling is only a small part of the modern titles, when recent Switch titles have looked and ran like crap, and this long integral to the Pokemon series company makes their own game that looks like crap, I can't help but raise an eyebrow. I couldn't find a lot of sales data on this game, but from what I can tell, it did pretty decently well for itself, but pretty poorly for a Pokemon spin-off. From what I saw on social media, the countless people who preach that graphics aren't everything and flocked to Scarlet and Violet seemed awful quiet and uninterested when this game launched. Also, before I continue, little unscripted tangent here, but one of my least favorite things is us versus them mentalities. I can see how this last note and that little bit about Power World could be interpreted as a us versus them kind of thing, but please don't ever interpret things that I say in that kind of manner. I never want to group people into one camp or the other, or treat things as if you're not with us, you're against us, yada yada, but just trying to identify some broader trends that I've noticed. Anyway, back to my actual script that I've written out here. One aspect of Pokemon that's received a fair bit of attention and drama over the past year has been in the competitive VGC community. Reason being, how it's becoming increasingly more difficult, time-consuming, and expensive to be a part of it without cheating. It is worth noting in this context, cheating does not mean to give an unfair advantage, but rather to reduce time and money that would otherwise need to be invested to achieve the same outcome. It's like how sometimes I cheat, and always disclose that I do in some of my single-player playthroughs, instead of taking dozens of hours grinding time this would otherwise take, because I'm a busy adult with other crap to do. Like, man, all the video essays I'd make if I just had more time. And this has stirred up some controversy and discussion in the Pokemon VGC community. which I won't delve too much into here, but you can find some dedicated videos on the subject in the pinned comment if you'd like to learn more. My quick 2 cents on the topic though is, as I've long said, Pokemon is getting more and more expensive and tedious to engage with the series itself as opposed to one isolated game, and this is just another symptom of that. The amount of different games, services, and systems you need to own at this point to engage in things like the VGC community without resorting to cheating is absurd, but I doubt the Pokemon Company will ease that burden anytime soon because of how profitable it is. If you want to be part of the Pokemon VGC community, just cheat. So many people already do, and as long as it doesn't give you some unfair advantage by giving you something that's not possible legitimately, then what's the harm? Updates continue to come out for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, though in many cases it just seemed to make the games worse. Once the DLC was revealed, the following update featured a permanent advertisement for it whenever you open the menu. So anytime you want to manage your Pokemon, open your bag, save your game, there's an advertisement. This is the kind of thing I'd never imagined seeing in a game like Pokemon. Open one of the more recent Assassin's Creed games, and there's advertisements on the title screen of all these things they'd like you to be interested in, and even a shop on the pause screen. Play Tales of Arise, and anytime you go to a rest spot, there's a tab for downloadable content, and little tooltips about what's available now. Never thought I'd see this kind of thing in a Nintendo game, but here it is. And now that it's here, it's obvious that's what the space was made for in the first place. The menu is the exact length it is so they could later wedge in a permanent DLC advertisement, which you continue to carry with you in your pocket for your entire Scarlet and Violet journey, whether you like it or not. Even if you eventually shell out and buy it, it's still going to be there.
Everywhere I go, I see his face.
Something important to note about this DLC is it's the most expensive expansion DLC Nintendo has released to date. Nintendo expansion DLCs are typically $30 USD, or $40 Canadian. That's now been marked up by $5 for some reason. Hey, we're really sorry we released this bugged out unfinished mess of a game, but look, if you're willing to give us more money than you've ever given us for an expansion before, you can get something that might be better. We're going to let you know that every time you ever open your menu from now on. Time went on, and eventually the first wave of DLC released on September 13th, 2023. But we still can't talk about the DLC yet, because the DLC update itself caused the already broken main game to get broken even further beyond Super Saiyan, to the point that the game version just after the DLC Wave 1 patch had its main storyline be unbeatable unless you knew the trick to avoid it crashing. In the final battle of legendary Pokemon, if you hover over any of your Pokemon in the last few slots, something that at face value seems to be a necessity to navigate to Koraidon/Miraidon and beat the game will immediately crash. You can avoid this by instead pressing up, wrapping around to the bottom. But a casual player isn't going to somehow use their spidey sense to know that it's hovering over specific party slots that's causing the game crashes, and will probably think the game is just crashing randomly at this point. Meaning, for many players who were trying to beat the game on this specific version, it was just straight up impossible. Version 2.0.2 fixed this issue on October 11th. DLC Wave 1 was released on September 13th. So for the span of almost a month, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet was essentially an unbeatable game for countless players. The DLC patch also seemed to introduce random several-minute-long load times into the main game, along with other glitches that made speedrunners miserable for some time, such as not being able to properly send out your Pokemon at times. This update also seemed to include the first code for the new Stellar Terra type, which will be properly introduced later in the Indigo Disk. However, the anonymous hacker known as 4chan was quickly able to access this impossible-to-obtain Terra type, and if one of these players terastallized their Ogerpon into it in an online match, you'd now be soft-locked. And that's not all this patch broke. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet had an internal memory to track defeated trainers up to a maximum of 300 trainers. Whenever you defeated a trainer, it would be saved into a slot of this memory so the game knows you've defeated them. This wasn't an issue in the main game on its own, since there wasn't any more than 300 trainers, but the DLC patch brought the number past 300, as there's now more trainers you can battle with the DLC content. This means that any players who defeated over 300 trainers would find themselves unable to truly defeat any more than that, instead finding them infinitely rematchable, which made certain quests incompletable. You're one of the players who's played our game the most by defeating everyone you could find in Paldea. Time to be punished for that by making this content incompletable until we can be bothered to fix the incomplete product we sold you, which, like many of these other issues, took a month to be solved. You'd think that over time the game would get more and more fixed, but somehow this first DLC update only seemed to make things worse and worse. And this is all before even getting into the content of the DLC itself. Is it gone? Wait, what? 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 We're starting out with story this time to lay the groundwork for the other elements to be discussed within their context in the story. I was originally going to have one chapter for Teal Mask and one chapter for Indigo Disk that get discussed in their entirety in order, but I realized there was too much I wanted to say about the story, and it should get its own chapter so I don't ramble on forever about story in the middle of other points, especially considering that I know the story is easily going to be the majority of this whole video essay. Because we passed $45 to the director under the table at Naranja Academy, we're one of the lucky few selected to go on to the post-game content. We are introduced to Miss Briar, who's a teacher at Blueberry Academy in Unova we'll be going to in the next DLC. For now, she's bringing you to the land of Kitakami, where the terrestrial phenomenon has been detected. She's also interested in Area Zero, although doesn't yet have permission to go there, something that'll come up again way later. You're given permission to go on this trip as one of your teachers claims it's already been cleared with your mom, raising some serious ethical concerns as you just take his word for it.
I was acting.
This teacher then completely unprompted tells you about the Scarlet book, and how she's the ancestor of the author Heath, and that the book tells of a Pokemon called Terrapagos in the Area Zero depths, and that her dream is to one day find Terrapagos. No idea why this teacher just dumps this all on this random kid that she's taking on a field trip out of nowhere. Hey kid, you ready to go on this field trip? Great. By the way, you ever seen the movie Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey? Yeah, my granddad's aunt's neighbor's dog's original owner actually helped write that script. Also, because there were too many other things that caught my attention during the plot, combined with a gap between the DLC releases, I honestly completely forgot about this and thought that Briar was some completely random teacher by the time we got to the Area Zero depths later. Anyway, Briar finishes her trauma dump and we head off to the land of Kitakami along with these guys we're never really going to notice again, and we're shown the hidden treasure of Area Zero Part 1. Area Zero is not going to come up ever again during this DLC. And so we made it to the land of Kitakami, which I'll say right now runs about as well as main game Scarlet and Violet, giving one of the students immediate frame rate sickness. Miss Briar, I don't feel so good. Because of this, we're tasked to run ahead to let the caretaker know we're here. Here we meet Carmine and Kieran. I know some people pronounce it Carmine, like, fight me. Carmine is the much more assertive one, while Kieran is more timid in nature. Carmine stares you down with her crazy lizard eyes and immediately challenges you to a battle, despite the fact that we are in a rush because this one kid is suffering from severe frame rate sickness, but hey.
Remy, speak. Fuck! Good boy.
We see that Carmine seems to be the much more dominant and troublemaking of the two siblings. You then meet the caretaker, and you're shown the place that you'll be staying. The next day, we're introduced to Carmine and Kieran properly, students from Blueberry Academy who were originally from Kitakami. Students are required to pair up and find 3 signboards across the island, an innovative idea for a group activity. Wait, really? We're then given selfie sticks so we can be as annoying of tourists as we want, as we record video essays in foreign countries that will never actually have the time to make into full video essays. And then the caretaker uploads a new emote into your mind like it's the Matrix because he doesn't even show it. Briar seems unimpressed by it, even though she's literally never even seen what it is.
What the fuck is this?
Kieran seems to have taken a shining to you, and so you pair up with him. Once again, the game exemplifies that Carmine is an aggressive-natured older sister, while Kieran is this timid boy who doesn't challenge her or fight back when she challenges him on something. So you battle Kieran and then set out to find the signboards, although he goes on ahead, because we all know what happened the last time we explored with others.
What is happening? What is happening?
On the signboards, we learn the story of the fearsome ogre of Kitakami, who was this terrible monster who was stopped by the loyal three who gave their lives to stop the ogre. Kieran's favorite in the story is the ogre, though, which he seems to have been quite obsessed with for some time. Kieran learns that you're someone special because you keep a kaiju in your pocket. You have this awesome, unique Pokemon nobody else has, something he wants one day. We learn about the ogre having different powers when it donned its 4 different masks, which the loyal 3 had once taken. Kieran tells you his dream is to be someone people can rely on. He wants to be someone special. A hero embarking on the hero's journey, along with the ogre, is what it seems like he wants. Before seeing the last signboard, though, Kieran wants to go to the ogre's supposed home, the dreaded den. The ogre doesn't appear to be here, but Kieran thinks that maybe some kind of battle might get the ogre to come out. Like, by battling with you here, this might just be his moment, the inciting event or call to action in his story. Nothing happens, so let's look at the ogre's den. Kieran feels kinda bad for the ogre, and shares what he tried to do to make her life easier.
And who's that? Oh, it's Mr. MVP! Simp!
We then learn about the Festival of Masks. You know, the things known to bestow power to the being those on the island fear, but hey. We meet Kieran's grandparents. Looks like we're friends, and Kieran's real happy to hear this. Kieran seems to be big vibing with you, while his sister is the one giving you a bit of a hard time. People then pop into the Mask Festival whenever they feel so inclined as you arrive. Carmine then unconsensually handles your roto stick to snap a photo that, I guess like that pose, is just uploaded to our brains, despite the fact that we've literally been taking photos that the game has shown us throughout this entire game. Kieran starts to show a bit of cockiness. He's the only one that truly understands the ogre. Everyone else is wrong about her. We then spot what's obviously a small child just outside the festival who we go to say hi to when Carmine joins us.
Hello, young lady.
Mysterious kid big vibes with you because main character privilege, but runs away from Carmine and drops her name of the DLC before running off. Carmine elects to lie to Kieran about meeting the ogre due to how hyperfixated on it he is. Now, Carmine starts spending more time with you since you've got this shared secret you're keeping under wraps, even though the player has literally no choice in that. Now, Carmine's seeming like the one claiming you, and Kieran feels kind of betrayed. We then give Grandpa the name of the DLC, and he decides to tell you the truth of the ogre, Ogerpon, which had been passed down their family but kept secret from the rest of the village, and he says should remain so. The story goes the ogre and a man came to the island, but they didn't quite fit in as people were afraid of them, so they lived in the cave. The village mask maker felt bad for them though, so he made them some badass masks with some valuable gems, which let them be a part of the village festival without arousing any suspicion at all. But it turns out the masks were way too badass, as the trio that would later be known as the Loyal Three literally killed the dude and took all of the masks but one. Holy shit. So the ogre went down to the village and murdered those 3, although the game would never use words like that. The villagers were like, what the fuck? So they began to look up to the Loyal 3 and look down on this dick who just murdered them in the streets. This truth needs to remain hidden because nobody would believe such a tale that their whole culture is wrong, to the point one of their ancestors who did try to tell the truth was apparently persecuted as a heretic. Hot damn, this got serious. Carmine feels this should be kept secret from Kieran as well, but he knows. Meanwhile, Grandpa's going to fix up the mask. Kieran confronts you about what's being kept from him. Vote now on your phones about whether to lie to him or to lie to him. For the final sign, Kieran challenges you to a battle, this time expressing more frustration at not being able to beat you and throwing himself under the bus. The final sign tells us that if the ogre so much as sees your face, your soul is forfeit and you will never return to the village. Geez, this place sure isn't messing around when it comes to their beliefs. Here we see Kieran relating to the ogre feeling like an outcast. One of my biggest complaints with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is it had a bad habit of telling rather than showing. Characters will just straight up tell you how they're feeling rather than implying it, and I'm genuinely happy to say that the DLC did improve in that regard. Kieran never tells you that he feels like an outcast, but the game implies it in a few ways, and even shows you how it may have come to be. Kieran is timid by nature, hiding behind his sister like a shield, and not being able to muster up the courage to talk to others he's interested in, spurring his sister to do it for him. This timid nature makes it difficult to make close connections, which the game shows us through the fact that friend is such a foreign term to him and he enjoys the sound of it, and his grandparents being happy for him having made a friend. But just as he's starting to feel like things are on the up and up with this new friend, they team up with his sister to lie to him about the truth he already believed of the figure he relates to. In his mind, he's back to on his own again. As Kieran describes the ogre here, it's meant to make you question whether he's talking about the ogre or himself, to the point one of the dialogue options is an apology to him, at which point the game hides his eyes, as if meant to don a mask and not show one's true face, as he asks, for what? Then, in the last photo, he retreats back into his shell he had been coming out of previously. This is showing rather than telling, something main game Scarlet and Violet could have learned a lot from. Turns out, to repair the ogre's mask, we're going to need a crystal from the crystal pool. So, we go to grab that. Carmine tells us there's a weird rumor that you can meet people here who've passed away, but I'm sure that's nothing. Briar shows up and tells us the lake essentially has terrestrial energy. Anyway, we get back, and it turns out Kieran ran off with the mask. We confront him at Loyalty Plaza, where he then says that you've been treating him the same as the ogre, and making the most against him assumptions about the situation. We battle Kieran, who's frustrated about not being as strong as you, to the point he falcon punches the monument and gives you back the mask. This brings back the dead and revives the Loyal 3. Wait, pause. Hold on. This brings back the dead, reviving the Loyal 3. Excuse me, what? I couldn't even find any clear answer online for how this came to be, so it seems like the kind of thing that happened just because it needed to happen so we can face these Pokemon, and not because it made any sense.
I think it's time I brought about the darkest day, for the sake of Galar's future, of course. But I'm in a bit of a pickle. The energy released by the darkest day is a bit too much for us to contain.
Oh man, they're coming back from the dead. They're pissed off. They're so pissed, in fact, that they're coming back from death. As one does. Someone had a bad take, an L take on Twitter. So they need to come back. I know in a fantasy series like Pokemon we need to suspend some level of disbelief, but 3 corpses being brought back to life because a kid punched their shrine? That's where I draw the line, I think. We're now faced with a freshly revived Mr. Grizz, Monkey Ball, and Galarian Articuno, who I guarantee by being DLC exclusive sort of are, sort of not legendaries, they're probably going to be incredibly forgettable in the long term. Like, I honestly forgot Calyrex and its horses existed until the Indigo Disk brought the horses back. They then make off and take the 3 masks at Kitakami Hall, 1 mask each, having been given to them along with other gifts, considering these people worshipped them, and now it seems like they're going after the ogre. Carmine goes to fix the mask we have, since it can grant Ogerpon power, and we head up to save the ogre. These 3 have previously murdered a guy because he had cool masks, and are facing down the one who murdered them in revenge, but they don't really do anything apart from making sounds at her, because this isn't one of the higher quality cutscenes. And also, I don't know what actually showing violence might do to this game's age rating, but it's not like they'd have to take things any farther than the anime ever has with Pokemon using moves on other Pokemon. And before I get comments that are like, oh, it's Pokemon, you can't have any violence at all, play Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers, the game where the characters are literally tied to the stockade for execution. We then battle Diddy Kong, Carmine and Kieran arrive, and the three run away. Kieran apologizes to you and meets the ogre, trying to give the mask to her. She doesn't want it from him, though, seeming to hurt him, but she accepts it from you. Because unlike Kieran, you shelled out money for this piece of shit. We then decide we should reclaim the other 3 masks from the Loyal 3 and return to Ogerpon. What do you think the Loyal 3 do from here? Do they set up another ambush, as the game implies? Do they leave the island now that they have the masks again they previously murdered a dude over? Do they come up with some other dastardly scheme? Nope. They split up, scatter around the region, and do...
Nothing. Huh? You heard me. Nothing.
Something very familiar about all this.
Ogerpon's tagging along with us, but seems comfortable with you. So Kieran feels hurt by the fact that she doesn't seem to like him and runs off on his own. Through the power of the darkest day, I guess, the Loyal 3 have gotten huge. So we defeat them and do...
Nothing. Huh? You heard me. Nothing.
Wait, what? We just let them run free? These 3 have literally murdered a dude over some masks. We're presumably plotting to do the same to the one who murdered them, and are literally walking vengeful corpses resurrected, and we just let them run off saying, that's what you get. What?
Right. Now don't do it again.
Like, I get it. This is what Pokemon has always done. We might defeat some evil team leader in battle, have our Pokemon still ready and able to do battle while all theirs are knocked out, and just stand aside and do nothing as they waddle away, waddle, having events come to be that could have been completely avoided had we maybe just apprehended the evil dude. But come on, we're really just going to let go the dangerous figures everyone on the island seems to worship and would side with? Meaning we'd probably never get a chance like this again if the Loyal 3 were smart and used this to their advantage. We're not even smart enough to nab the masks from them before letting them run off. They just so happen to drop them after we defeat them.
What is the hole here?
Oh. There's no way ceiling tiles like that support his weight.
Oh no.
Wow, this really is a Pokemon game. We then start making memories with Ogerpon as our new best friend. After we reclaim all the masks, Kieran asks you to come to the village along with Ogerpon, promising it'll be fine. Ogerpon actually put some genuine trust into Kieran to enter the village. Turns out, Kieran told everybody in the village the truth, and they all believed him. Hold on. Rewind for a hot second. On the signboards, we learn the story of the fearsome ogre of Kitakami, who was this terrible monster who was stopped by the Loyal 3 who gave their lives to stop the ogre. This truth needs to remain hidden because nobody would believe such a tale that their whole culture is wrong, to the point one of their ancestors who did try to tell the truth was apparently persecuted as a heretic. The final sign tells us that if the ogre so much as sees your face, your soul is forfeit and you will never return to the village. Jeez, this place sure isn't messing around when it comes to their beliefs. You're telling me this child, who's so timid that the mere concept of friend is such a foreign idea to him, combined with the fact that he's been studying abroad at Blueberry Academy for who knows how long, meaning that it's highly unlikely anyone in the village knows him all that well, told everyone in the village their whole culture is wrong and they just immediately believed him. Do you think if I rolled into some Catholic church and proclaimed, hey, Satan is actually a pretty cool dude and it's God who's a massive douche, that everyone would suddenly be like, oh shit, really? Thank you for telling us. We'll be sure to believe that instead from now on. This doesn't make sense but is going to happen because it's what needs to happen in this story is wild. I think this might be the single most questionable thing I've ever seen in a story, and I've seen some incredibly questionable things before. I thought for sure this story was going to go in the most typical way possible at this point, which in my opinion is the villagers don't believe him. They start to side against Kieran for daring to say such a thing, but then Ogerpon relates to Kieran in feeling like an outcast, coming full circle as Ogerpon now relates to Kieran the way that Kieran relates to her, as she now comes in to defend him. This shocks the villagers, but this act of heroism from this feared ogre for this boy makes them question if there may have been some truth to what he was saying, now that they've actually seen this selfless act by the ogre. This helps the villagers to be a bit more open-minded to the ogre, and start being more accepting to her. And then the final beats of the story can still go the same way where Ogerpon still prefers you over Kieran and he gets pissed. That's the most typical way I imagine the sequence to go. But they couldn't even do that. Instead, the writing took what I would have guessed was the laziest possible approach and cranked it up to 11 by having Kieran tell the villagers the truth, the thing that got one of his ancestors branded as a heretic apparently, and they all just believed him and accepted Ogerpon in the 20-minute span it took for us to fight the Loyal 3. Words cannot express how incredibly stupid this is, but I'll do my best to express it in words anyway. Holy shit, what the fuck. We bring Ogerpon back to its home, but it seems like instead, Ogerpon would rather go with you. Kieran's not feeling all too jazzed about this though, wanting Ogerpon with him, challenging you to a battle for her, feeling entitled to her after these feelings he's held for so long and efforts he went to. There's a level of frustrated determination to him pulling out the Pokeball as he prepares for the final showdown. Kieran finds himself losing, to which he utters, "Figures." We then battle Ogerpon, who dons each of the masks we need to defeat her with.
Persona!
I love how its memories of adventuring with you grant Ogerpon strength. Like, you just tagged along with us for 20 minutes defeating the Loyal 3 and reclaiming the masks. And not only that, but we did it with Carmine. Ogerpon hasn't really spent much more time with us than her, but we're the special someone, seemingly because we remind her of her old partner, who had such a terrifying face that everyone was so afraid in the village. After a long battle, we managed to catch Ogerpon. Kieran congratulates you, but expresses frustration at not being like you, at being the hero, the chosen one, the one who overcomes every challenge and has others admire him. Kieran then shuts himself away, and we have one final battle with Carmine. We then wrap up the trip since every group got photos with 3 signs. Wow, worst field trip ever.
Hear that? We did it! We found them all! Yeah! That was so much fun!
It seems Briar, Carmine, and Kieran need to return to Blueberry Academy because there's some developments regarding the Great Crater. Excuse me, what? Haven't you still not gotten permission to enter the Great Crater? And isn't it in Paldea? You know, the presumably complete opposite side of the planet from Blueberry Academy. You need to return to the Academy sooner than expected because there have been some developments regarding the Great Crater. What does this even mean? Carmine expresses her gratitude to you, saying she initially treated you all like outsiders, but then found out you were cool. Meanwhile, Kieran's in his bedroom, which for some reason seems to be the only layout for a bedroom in the game at all, obsessing over how he's going to get stronger with a grin, seeming to be directed at the player, and ending with a "to be continued." I was originally going to analyze Teal Mask Kieran a bit deeper here before we delve into the Indigo Disk, because there is a bit of depth to unpack here, but I feel like I can better analyze him once we have an idea of the character as a whole, especially considering when I played the Teal Mask, I really didn't like this story. I was so distracted by the parts of it that are just pure garbage or make absolutely no sense at all, and had way too much fun calling Kieran a simp, that I didn't really get the chance to consider the genuinely interesting character that they were constructing here, something that Indigo Disk made a bit more apparent, and I was later able to return to the story of the Teal Mask in a bit of a better light. So, let's delve into the Indigo Disk. Clavel rings you up to tell you the director of Blueberry Academy has invited you there. The BB director, Cyrano, whatever, fight me, meets you in the Naranja lobby, who expresses interest in having you as an exchange student because Carmine recommended you. I guess this school just takes on foreign exchange students from completely different schools by recommendation. So, you fly with them to Blueberry Academy in the Unova region. Again, this DLC is still called the Hidden Treasure of Area Zero, and we're on the other side of the planet from it, And Area 0 really isn't going to come into play until the very end. What a great DLC name. The school is out in the middle of the ocean, being mostly underwater in a terrarium, which honestly is really cool. We meet Lacey, who tells us Pokemon can actually terastallize here. Cyrano feels the two of us should have a battle, so we do. We head into the terrarium, which will honestly just load whatever it feels like loading at any given moment. Here we have the nice and toasty subtropical savanna biome. What the? What the hell did I just see? Runs like trash. I simply refuse to believe it. Running like trash in my Pokemon game? Look at those N64 hills! Turns out, Terastal energy comes from the big bubble that had the Sylvelum Super Boss in it from Xenoblade Chronicles X. Looks like our first, and only, as far as I'm aware, class is going on in the coastal biome. We reach the class, where the instructor tells us the Pokemon species here have grown larger than they would in other regions due to all the light here in the underwater terrarium as opposed to just normally outside with full exposure to natural sunlight. So we're just going to pretend that that makes sense for a hot sec. Suppose they've just really pumped up the artificial light here. He wants us to catch an Alolan form Pokemon, which can come to be here due to the light level. Wait, those occur naturally in other regions. Maybe he meant to say that they develop differently to some other regions? That this area mimicked the Alola region in particular? Also, can we just pause and think about this for a second? This entire place is an artificial terrarium under the ocean. Any wild Pokemon that are brought here, there's no getting out. This is an academy where lessons are things like catching Pokemon. So this academy takes Pokemon from their natural habitats and releases them into this artificial zone they can't escape from until they're eventually hunted and caught for sport. Well, that got dark fast. So we catch an entire palm tree and show it to the instructor. The lesson is concluded, and it's homework for any students who couldn't do it on class time. If you're a Pokemon lucky enough to have avoided being caught then, not for long then, I guess. Anyway, Carmine calls you and wants to meet up. Turns out she and Briar have been exploring different regions for her research. We defeat her in a double battle, and she brings up Kieran, who it seems is right around the corner. This guy couldn't train up the amount of Pokemon Kieran asked due to family troubles, and Kieran abstracts onto this guy what I can only guess is his image of his past self, seeing him as content to be weak, and forcing him to quit Kieran's club because of it. We end up meeting Drayton, who was the strongest here before Kieran. After finding out you're apparently Kieran's friend, Drayton gets to work recruiting you into his club, the League Club, essentially a mock Pokemon League with the strongest being the Elite Four and Champion, with Drayton being one of the Elite Four and Kieran being the reigning champion. We're shown our dorm room, which is the same layout as every other dorm room anywhere on the planet apparently. Drayton wants you to take the League Challenge to try and become the new champion. With other Elite Four and Champion here, Kieran recognizes you and is surprised you're here. Drayton decides to put you entering the league to a vote, with the tiebreaker being left to Kieran, who decides he doesn't lose, so it makes no difference. And not only that, but he wants to rematch you. Kieran's obsession with things playing out the way he wants seems to continue here, and that it must be the case that you can have your rematch, not get knocked out by one of the Elite Four. With this new mentality of his, the roles of the siblings have switched. Kieran is now the assertive and aggressive one, and Carmine the more timid one who gets pushed around. So we venture across the terrarium, defeating all of the Elite Four members, many of whom express concern for Kieran. We earn the right to battle the BB League champion Kieran, who Drayton expresses his desire for somebody to snap him out of this cold funk, hoping that somebody could be you, having failed to do it himself. Kept me waiting. I worked so hard for a chance to show you what I can really do, Harmonia. With my backwards fanny pack, I put everything into studying and making my Pokemon stronger. Crushed the Elite Four and became champion. Why does it like freeze before it cuts over? All of that hard work. All of it. All of it was just so I could beat you. Right here, right now. We begin the battle with Kieran, who's now stronger than ever. It also turns out he's such a simp for Ogerpon, he has like a sixth sense about her, considering if you send out a Zoroark disguised as her, He has no reaction. But the moment you send out the real Slim Shady, he immediately knows that's her and gets pissed off. Now that's impressive, kid. You've got some nerve. Bring out the ogre now of all times! Although he had no reaction when I brought out the illusion ogre. Some of his in-battle lines are rather telling, such as landing a critical hit where he says, "Even luck's chosen you over me. It's not fair. It's just not fair!" Kieran clearly resents his past self. Not like that kid you battle on Kitakami. I don't need the old me anymore. And even resenting others that remind him of his past self, like the guy that he kicked out of his club. His past self was the one that failed to rise to the occasion, failed to get Ogerpon, failed to be the hero. But that all changes now. We defeat Kieran, which once again leaves him in the mental state that he's the opposite of what he wants to be. He wants to be the powerful trainer who defeats every foe, who earns people's admiration, the main character of this story. This is where what they were interested in is over. This is as far as his journey went, as far as they care about. To use an example people may be able to relate to on this platform, it's like a content creator who couldn't keep on making content to stand out and be interesting to an audience, so people move on. Once again, Kieran couldn't match the role he wanted for himself and struggles to cope with it. With the ex-champion on the ground, the new champion is awarded the BB League prize for becoming champion, a Master Ball. Drayton expresses his desire for Kieran to just go back to having fun with things, to not let his unhealthy desires tear him apart. Kieran's not listening though, and is instead fantasizing about how things are going to be different next time. This is all just another trial in the journey he's the hero of. Eventually, if he keeps working at it, he will come out on top. Briar then calls us to a classroom, as she invites you all to an expedition to Area 0 in search of the legendary Pokemon Terrapagos, with the words "legendary Pokemon" catching Kieran's interest. Turns out the Barbie doll-looking champion has sanctioned this trip, because recently they've had to confront the possibility dangerous Pokemon could escape the area. Are you kidding me? Now they're concerned about that? Not when there was a time machine running, snatching up Pokemon from other times, and there were some of them actually escaping Area 0. I'm sure there's still lots in there. This is an action that should have been taken much earlier. Gita even defends you going into Area 0 without permission in a later line because we have good reason to believe that all of Paldea would have been at risk if the champion hadn't ventured into Area 0. So, are they just idiots, or they didn't care about the ongoing threat? Anyway, because now the area is deemed a threat since we forked over $45 to enter this DLC, and they're busy doing whatever it is they do, they needed other capable people to research the area for them, aka some expendable foreign school children. They wanted the students from this academy on the other side of the planet because they're good at battling. Was there really not anything a little bit more local they could have sought out? And if crossing the planet for this is in the budget, they could have sought out help literally anywhere outside this kid's school, but that'd make too much sense, so we're going to have to ignore that to continue this story. Also, the people that are asked are Briar, which we haven't been given any indication for Gita to know the capabilities of, a new champion who wasn't even expected to be here, the ex-champion, one of the Elite Four members in particular, and as far as Gita should be aware, just some random student. If they needed a team of very capable individuals, would they not have called maybe at least the whole Elite Four to this meeting? No? Anyway, Kieran decides he's going, and we end up embarking on this journey with him, Carmine, and Briar. Also, turns out Gita forgot to give something to Briar, so she gives you the name of the DLC, the Indigo Disk, to you to give to Briar. Spoilers, you will never actually give Briar the Indigo Disk. Kieran's calmed himself down and says he knows what he has to do now, because he's now decided the next way things are going to play out. He's going to catch this legendary Pokemon that's uniquely his own, and become the strongest. So, we make it to Area 0, which is just as much of a flashbang as before. None of us really have appropriate wear for an expedition, especially Briar, who's intent on going even deeper, as Heath had written about deeper depths. I'm going to be honest, the last time this book and Heath was brought up was briefly at the very beginning of the Teal Mask DLC. I had zero clue who Heath even was anymore by the time I played this. Also, what Heath described could have just been depths of Area Zero that have already been discovered all these years later since the book was written. It doesn't necessarily mean there's for sure something down there that hasn't been discovered, but in a story like this, there's a 100% chance that's exactly what it means. And so, we head down into the depths, on our own. Our allies will spawn in for cutscenes because we know what happened last time they were allowed to follow us in chat. That should be alright. Last time I was here, I caught... Ah! What? None of your business? Wait, what? What happened to the text? What? Why did they start getting mad at each other? We make it to the lab again, where Briar says she wants to go even deeper than undisclosed room with unknown purpose. If she doesn't know what the time machine room is, how does she know it's for sure not connected to the thing she's interested in? Because we as the player have already experienced it and know what's in that room. So Briar needs to be written with a strong disinterest in this completely unknown room, but a strong interest in the area beneath it, because surely there's no connection between these things. We later see how insanely obsessed she is with this research, to the point I wrongly predicted that maybe she's a robot too. And yet, this obsession has zero overlap into the thing that's implied to have a connection to the thing she's obsessed with. Also, apparently Geeta isn't even willing to disclose the time machine to those selected to go do research on the place with the time machine. I can't, man. Anyway, the panel spawns in just in time, but it's locked us out now. Kieran's getting a bit happier because he has hope again for something going the way he wants, once again feeling like the up-and-coming hero in his journey. Despite it being locked, luckily the machine sniffs out the Indigo Disk on you, so you insert these pirated games into the machine, and the door opens at a frame rate of fuck you, this is a $45 DLC. There are full games that are cheaper than this. Also, I guess we're just going to leave the disc here because we never see or hear about it ever again. We enter the lab and see further evidence of Kieran reverting to his old self, the self with hope for things going the way he wants them to. To make it to the further depths, we once again enter the dimension Squidward was stuck in that time travel episode, which magically becomes an elevator after a fade through black. Briar's obsession keeps on making her seem robot-like, and even potentially villain-like with her illusions, neither of which are actually the case, as it turns out. We make it into the Area Zero deeper depths, where many research notes have been left by Professor Sada, who seem to be aware of Terrapagos, and the unique stellar type down here, a combination of every type. Turns out the hidden treasure of Area Zero was Terrapagos all along. We trek further in, and here your allies will just wait and then teleport wherever they need to for cutscenes. It seems we need to defeat stellar-type terastallized Pokemon to send these crystals to the back rooms so we can proceed further and further. Also, after Carmine establishes Briar is no good in battle, that makes me further question Geeta's whole I want capable people researching Area Zero because it's super dangerous deal. Guess we're just going to forget about that. As we venture further down, we find a tree made completely of crystal that does...
Nothing. Huh? You heard me. Nothing.
There's no point to this room, so moving on. We open the passageway to Terrapagos, and Kieran expresses his concern that they're relying too much on the player. Apparently, they fought off some wild Pokemon earlier, and this just so happens to be like the one instance in Pokemon game history, as far as I'm aware, where your companion trainer doesn't just have infinity heals. And so, Carmine only has one Pokemon left for when she battles alongside you later. Also, this Pokemon is at full health, and presumably full PP, which I love the implications of. It means that she was battling a wild Pokemon, and there was something that took out her second last Pokemon at the same time that the wild one was taken out. That, or she caught the wild Pokemon after she sent out her final Pokemon that she had yet to do anything with. But we can't catch anything here right now, so I doubt she can either. But anyway, that's all just a silly thought. It seems our Terra Orbs are reacting because of how much Terrestrial energy is down here, getting Kieran to rush off towards the hidden treasure. We make it into the final room, with its beautiful RGB 000 floors. Don't think I won't come back to this when we talk about the graphics. Briar and Kieran rush up to this pedestal to find a single green rupee. Now they can return to Morshu now that they're a little bit richer. Kieran's determined to get the hidden treasure and defeat you. I can finally beat Harmonia. Iki, you still going on about that nonsense? Shut this. Harmonia's everything I've ever wanted. The ogre? That's about it. He's got strong Pokemon. He can go anywhere he wants, and he can be friends with anyone. I loved Ogerpon since forever ago, but even Ogerpon chose him over me. But Iki, you did your best too. Even you, sis. Being all nasty toward him at first, but then boom, you're like best friends in no time. Well, I've got nothing. I worked so hard, and for what? I still lost in the end. This is all I have left now. And so he yanks the darn thing while Briar encourages him since she's obsessed with this thing. Turns out, the real treasure was
Our beloved mascot, Turtles! Reveal yourself! Turtles? Turtles? Turtles! Where are you, boy? Turtles!
Oh. Hello, little guy. How are you? What are you doing out here all alone?
Turtles! Handling a man's turtle.
Immediately on Turtles coming out, it starts making its way towards us because we have that $44.99 privilege. And you know, realistically, if the prize for becoming champion at the BB League is a Master Ball, Kieran should, in theory, own a Master Ball. But there's no way they'd actually play into that and have him use... holy shit, they actually did it. And Terapagos is locked into the device. He actually did it. He's the proud owner of a legendary Pokemon. Briar wants to observe it right away, and Kieran wants the rematch he's truly been waiting for. Finally, things are going his way. This is the time he defeats us once and for all. Kieran sends out the... oh, it's also called the Indigo Disk, Terapagos, with one big health bar at the top as opposed to a regular Pokemon battle. You defeat Terapagos, leaving Kieran distressed yet again about things not going the way he wants. But Briar feels there's something wrong, and tells Kieran to terastallize Turtles. Enjoy the only terastallization animation ever where everybody else doesn't despawn in the process, since it's an actual cinematic here. Terapagos' power is too great, however, and it fires off a bolt of energy headed at Kieran, which Koraidon takes for him, serving to Kieran as another reminder of the special Pokemon who accompany the player. Kieran tries to return Terapagos to the Master Ball, which only ends up shattering it in the process. Along with Carmine, it's up to you to battle Terapagos now, as Kieran blames himself for what's come to pass. Terastallization is the only way to do significant damage for a lot of the battle, but it doesn't take long for Terapagos to absorb your Terastal energy you now need to take turns building up again. Carmine's Pokemon eventually falls, and she urges Kieran to join the battle. He beats himself up, feeling like he can't do anything right and can't help anyone. But eventually, he clenches his fist and steps forward to join into the battle and help you in stopping Terapagos. Together, you manage to defeat it, and it's up to you to catch Terapagos, as Kieran cheers you on, and the hidden treasure of Area 0 is captured. Briar apologizes for her obsessiveness getting everyone into trouble, and Kieran apologizes for trying so hard to be like the player, but just not being able to, and deciding to let that all go. Back at the academy, Kieran apologizes again, this time for all the trouble he caused, wanting to make things right and start over as friends. Before we really unpack, there is one more tidbit. Briar thanks you for your help and gives you a book she published on what she learned. After this, you can go to the Crystal Lake with Terapagos, which summons the real Professor Sada, before having developed the Time Machine, who could be from our timeline, or perhaps even another. The professor deduces that this is the future of a similar timeline, and decides to exchange information during this time we have. She tells you she has a son, who she imagines must be quite lonely, but isn't really going to make any efforts to help him. Asshole. The Time Machine is currently in progress for this professor, having been enamored with the Scarlet Book from a young age, but progress has come to a halt. You end up telling the professor about Koraidon, who doesn't really seem to care about personal attachments. Asshole. Then her spidey senses tingle as she knows you have a special book, the hidden treasure of Area Zero. Sada proposes an exchange of her Scarlet Book for your hidden treasure of Area Zero, which you have no choice but to accept before she vanishes back to her own timeline, successfully doing what is probably the stupidest thing a Pokemon protagonist has ever done, and that's saying something. Whether in our timeline or another timeline, we've just enabled the professor to complete the time machine, continue working away at it while ignoring her son Arvin, and bring potential ruin on Paldea in her idiotic plan of Pokemon of the past and present all being able to live hand in hand together by summoning past Pokemon with a time machine as much as she can, as well as leading to the professor's own death. We would know all this considering the main game journey we went through, and just willingly hand over the keys to have this occur. Wow, I guess the player character just wants to watch the world burn. I've seen some say online that the Scarlet Book was the key to activate the time machine, so now it can't be completed in that timeline. But the machine hasn't even been made at this point. Why would somebody design something from the ground up only to be activatable with a key that doesn't even exist? Like, I know the professor is really dumb, but that would just take it to a whole new level. Plus, there's also at least 2 books, if not more, as one exists in Naranja Academy. We've just brought destruction on a timeline. Now that's new for Pokemon. Well, that's it. That's the DLC story. The hidden treasure of Area Zero. By far, the best part of the story is Kieran, who I want to take a bit to unpack now that we've seen the full picture with him. He's a kid who feels like an outsider, what with his lack of friends, which is probably largely due to his timid nature holding him back from really putting himself out there. He likes the ogre from his local legend because the ogre is an outcast, and the ogre is powerful. Filling in the gaps here with some of my own inferences, he probably fantasizes about being a protagonist not too dissimilar from the hero of many Pokemon games, becoming powerful enough to take on any foe who challenges him, showing kindness to those he cares about and receiving their affection in return, being the one who gets to adventure alongside the Pokemon of legend, Pokemon that are uniquely his own. If he just applies himself into this, then surely he'll earn that right and claim his place in this story he so desires to be true. Everyone sees themselves as the hero of their own journey, and it's easy to fall into a main character syndrome where we believe that because it's us, that everything will eventually work out the way we hope, and Kieran so desperately wants that to happen. Let's go visit Ogerpon. Nobody here. Let's have a battle and see if she shows up. Nothing happens. Let's head into her cave. Guess there's nobody here. I'm going to race out to her so I can return her mask despite still being kind of pissed at the others right now. I may be timid, but I'm going to tell everyone in town the truth. I'm going to battle and defeat the player to show Ogerpon my conviction. He's trying to open every opportunity for the hero's journey he desires to start, for him to be the one chosen by the local legend he relates to. In his desperation, he sees things transactionally. Because I did you this kindness, you should feel obligated to like me in turn. I put in the work, the world should recognize what I've done and have things go this way. He feels a level of entitlement towards what he puts in so much work for, and feels that when things don't work out the way that he's worked towards, that it's unfair, or that he's lacking in some way. He has to give up on becoming Ogerpon's partner, something he probably fantasized about for years. After getting cock-blocked and needing to move on, he sets his sights on becoming the strongest, like the player. Become the very best like no one ever was, and surely then he'll get the admiration and partners in his Pokemon journey he feels he deserves. He gives his all towards that goal, becoming the champion of the BB League, and looking down on those who aren't prepared to give everything they have towards that same goal. AKA, like his past self, where he wanted that goal, but he wasn't prepared to sacrifice everything for it. This all is then stripped away from him by the same person, however. He's no longer even the best at the BB League, and the spectators' interest and potentially admiration of him and his skill begins to fade. he's no longer the best. Time to move on. But now, here's another chance. There's this expedition to Area Zero to find its hidden treasure, the undiscovered Terrapagos, a unique legendary Pokemon that does not yet have a trainer to call its partner. This is it. Another chance. One he wouldn't let slip out of his grasp. But even when he had done it and called Terrapagos his partner, it was not truly his partner. The responsibility ultimately fell to the player to take it on, leading Kieran to lose it. He so desperately wanted to be the main character, the hero, to have power, admiration, and his special companions, and puts in a lot of work outside his usual comfort zone towards it, feeling that if he just does this, it'll work like a transactional process, where the world then has an obligation to give him what he's earned. But at every twist and turn, he finds this isn't the case. He can invest years of dreaming and singing the ogre's praises and doing anything in his power to help her, only to have the exchange student win her over. He gives his all towards becoming the strongest, only to have the exchange student prove they're stronger. His efforts are not reciprocated, and he alternates between blaming the world for its unfairness and blaming himself for his uselessness. This kind of unhealthy obsession is something we see a lot in the real world as well. Take being a big content creator, for example. I'm pretty sure it's one of, if not the most desired job among young people nowadays, and probably a good parallel we can draw to being a Pokemon master. People will look at big streamers / content creators and say, hey, I can do that, and feel like if they put in the work that there's some sort of an obligation from the world to slowly hand out the status they desire, as if it's a transactional process. In my over half a decade now of content creation, I've seen or heard a few of the horror stories of people who quit their jobs and go full-time into content creation, feeling if they just put in full-time work, the world will eventually give them the growth they desire. It'll start out small, but just give it time and keep up the effort. Dedicate your all towards it, and one day, it'll be big enough that you can go at it sustainably full-time. I might be at 0 viewers right now, but if I just commit to the grind, I can be just like those big content creators. Almost every situation like this is going to end in failure and financial burden, and the people who do this know this, but do it anyway because of this main character syndrome. Put a lot of effort into something and the world doesn't give you a return? But how could this be? I'm the main character. I put in so much work. Why isn't this fair? Why is the system rigged against me? Why am I so useless, such a failure? It can be easy to fall into this kind of pit, constantly questioning the world around you and your own self-worth. Maybe you put a massive ton of work into all these projects you're really passionate about, but you only really seem to get significant views when you do an essay on Pokemon. Want to feel shitty about yourself? Become a content creator. Sounds like something Kieran would say at his lowest points, doesn't it? I'm sure we all have those kinds of moments sometimes, questioning the fairness of it all when we witness success around us but can never quite grasp that same success ourselves, and questioning our own ability when it feels like we're lagging behind, seemingly failing in our roles as the main characters of our own stories. Forgive the lack of relevant footage for this, but there's a personal story I haven't shared before. Well, at least in this kind of manner. I shared it once in Fire Emblem Fates if you want to see something a little bit more in depth, which I think relates to Kieran's tale, and that's the story of my Taekwondo journey. I've been in Taekwondo since I was 4 years old. I earned my black belt when I was 12, not even a teenager yet, and a second degree black belt when I was 16. Then, when I was 19, I started testing for my third degree black belt, before I was even 20 years old, facing the challenge of breaking 3 boards in midair and a stack of 6 boards in 1 kick. I felt great, like I was on top of the world. Here I was pulling off these insane milestones at pretty young ages. But then the unexpected happened. My family has a bit of a history of joint issues, and if you're doing something like Taekwondo all your life, you can probably guess what effect that might have on that. I started to hurt really badly. I'd attempt my scissor roundos kick and need to excuse myself for a short while to stretch out my hip I found had flared up in pain in the process. Though not needed for these kicks, my wrists weren't in all that great of shape either, flaring up when bent backwards with pressure, such as opening a heavy metal door, assuming a push-up plank, or blocking a kick in sparring. I stepped away from Taekwondo for a while, stuck in physiotherapy at 19. I found myself surrounded by other people getting treatment, all middle-aged or older. I was the one person I saw there remotely near my age. My joint pain starting to become noticeable happened around the same time I started this channel, actually. Check out some of the earliest playthroughs around here and you might see me wearing a wrist brace. I knew that I should return to my training, but part of me worried if I could even do it, and I began to wonder if my physical condition really was holding me back from standing up to this challenge, or whether it was just an excuse for me to put off this challenge I felt unworthy to accomplish. After half a year of physio, I began to return to my training, and then a little something called COVID-19 started, feeling at the time as if the world was insistent on not letting me see this through. My training became very on and off for the next several years, with the dojang alternating between being opened and closed, and me being busy and stressed with a lot of university work. I did reattempt my testing several times through those years, but never quite managing to break those boards. I remained as one of the senior belts of the school, but with unmoving progress for years. I felt like, as a senior belt, it was my responsibility to be someone my juniors look up to and my peers respect. With my on and off training and unmoving progress, I felt like I was failing my peers as one of the seniors, failing in my duty as someone that they could look up to, and instead just being that one college student senior who pops in and trains every once in a while, who can't even fully commit to training as he often needs to step out to the side of the dojang and take a break from the exercises to stretch his troublesome joints. But continuing on like that for years taught me a lot about humility, self-expectations, and comparing oneself to others, something I now count as one of the most important steps in my Taekwondo journey. The progress others make compared to you doesn't matter. What matters is you making each of your own days better than the last. There's always going to be somebody making progress faster or somebody who's at a higher level. That doesn't mean that what you've achieved isn't something to be proud of. Maybe you can't quite overcome this challenge you've seen others do before you. Does that mean you're worthless? That you've failed in some way? No. What's important is not to obsess over the destination, to feel your efforts entitle you to it, but to truly have passion for the journey and the places it brings you, as you potentially discover sides of yourself you never thought possible. Discover what new avenues you can explore and lessons you can learn if you just give it the chance. In 2023, I began training more regularly, although just once, maybe seldomly twice a week, far from my 3 times a week I was pulling when I was 19 and younger at my peak. But this seemed to be a good balance between my Taekwondo life and my other obligations and passions in life. It was shortly after coming regularly into training again that I had the opportunity to retest. I was unconfident, but I wasn't going to hide from this challenge. Even if my odds were low and I was still getting back into shape again, there's no reason not to at least try. And so, scissor round I finally achieved. Although, I still failed power back, but it was only a few months later I finally surpassed that challenge too, and earned my 3rd degree black belt at the age of 24, 5 years later from when I was first presented this challenge in testing. The belt they had made for me probably had half a decade of dust on it on some shelf at the back at that point. I might not have achieved this goal at the time I originally hoped, being able to say that I became a 3rd degree black belt before I was even 20 years old, but at this point I can genuinely say I'm glad I didn't, as this is a lesson I wouldn't have been able to appreciate to the same level otherwise, and a meaningful story I could share. The story parallels Kieran in a lot of ways. You put in a lot of work and don't see the return you want, sometimes due to factors outside of your control, or perhaps because things going this way isn't as you thought it was. It can be easy to look at those who seem to just have it all made for them. A Pokemon hero is basically the living embodiment of the world handing them everything on a silver platter, but what does it really matter? No matter how much others seem to have going for them, they don't hold a monopoly on happiness. What's wrong is to decide how things are going to be, either hitting some exact goal in exactly the way you want, or even pushing yourself past someone you intend to surpass and then obsess over that, pursuing it single-mindedly with no regard for consequences, the well-being of others around you, and even the well-being of yourself. Because if you build up this imaginary house of cards you start meticulously placing cards on, what happens if one of them falls? Then the entire thing crumbles and you've only set yourself up for pain. You begin to resent the world for dropping that card, blame yourself for letting that card be dropped, and begin to feel the loss of this house of cards that you never even had. Perhaps you then decide you're going to set up a similar house of cards again, and feel that with enough work and dedication you will see this whole house of cards built. But then a card topples, or you can't quite get them to stand in the way you want, and the cycle repeats. But here's one of the ways I find Kieran's story a bit problematic. He doesn't achieve his goals, but at the end decides that's okay, and the sun sets on another journey. This feels like it's not quite the full story it should be, leaving on a note where the lesson can be interpreted as give up on your dreams, which is not at all what it should be saying here. What I feel the game is trying to say is not to obsess over your dreams, not to commit everything you have towards that goal that you lose sight of what else is important, to not put lofty expectations on yourself in the world, and in turn, blame yourself in the world when things don't go the way you want, but rather to take things one step at a time. It can be in pursuit of some bigger goal, but your happiness should be all the incredible steps you take along the way you can be proud of, not the binary, did you achieve the ultimate goal you set for yourself? That's the part it feels like this story is missing, where Kieran goes back to battling because it's something he genuinely loves, and he feels pride and accomplishment for continuing to improve and truly learn from the journey, where he learns to take it day by day, continuing to improve, rather than spending his time and efforts in a transactional effort for the world to reciprocate a specific outcome he feels he's owed. To show what it means to truly be happy, both with yourself and with your story that you are the main character of. But that's also where we get into what I'd argue is the other problematic part of the story, that this lesson can be easily lost on us as players. As a Pokemon hero, we have everything made for us. We're going to set out on a journey across the region, become the most powerful champion the region has seen, earn the admiration of others and the friendship of legendary Pokemon nobody else in the world has. We have it all because we are the hero. We just so happened to meet a legendary time lizard, who became our best friend because we gave it a laced sandwich. We become good friends with Nimona, Arvid, and Penny, essentially for free. They're the ones who just kind of decide they like us. We work together to stop the time machine and save the region from ruin because we just so happened to have that time lizard and Arvid's connection. Ogerpon becomes our friend because we fought the guys the game told us to fight. Trapagos becomes our friend because I don't even know. All these things that are just made for us, and we're actually a pretty awful human, honestly. Herba Mystica are these insanely rare plants that most people have never even heard of. So when we see plants, shouldn't it be our responsibility to take some seeds or cuttings from it and propagate the species to create more so we can help more people and Pokemon who found themselves like Mabosstiff? Nope, let's just cook that right up, even if it contributes to the extinction of the species. That Titan Pokemon that escapes Area 0 and is supposedly some big threat, we knock it out and that's it. Presumably it's only a matter of time before it wakes up and potentially wreaks havoc on Cascarafa. We just let the AI Sada tag along with us down into the time machine room, knowing full well that she's going to attack us and increase the risk of our efforts to save the region failing, instead of just tossing her on Koraidon's back, telling Koraidon to fly out of Area 0 like it once did, deactivating AI Sada and the time machine. Nah, we just have to have a heroic scene out of it rather than the best odds of saving the region and maybe even the world. Let's put the whole region in jeopardy for the sake of cinematics. We lied to Kieran by hiding the true nature of the ogre from him, betraying his trust in us. We beat up the wannabe Dynamax Loyal 3, who have been established as willing to commit murder over mere masks. Even if they do have funky crystals in them, there's lots of those around at the mountaintop, which implies that they really were willing to murder over something as trivial as masks, and we just let them go free. We have them defeated, but sure, just scamper off, that'll show you. It's a miracle, and a Pokemon game, for nobody in the village to end up dead from our inability to take action. And most of all, we created the possibility for either our timeline or some other timeline to face the same threat to the Paldea region, seeing the professor killed, Arvin's continued separation from his parent, the loss of the closest thing Arvin had to a parental figure after that, the serious injury to the point that it'll be the death of Arvin's Mabosstiff if there isn't enough Herba Mystica in that timeline, and the abduction of probably at least hundreds of Pokemon, if not thousands, from their natural worlds into a completely different, unfamiliar environment, knowing full well that by giving the professor this power, that's what we were setting in motion. the most evil of evil Pokemon leaders wish they could be as evil as the player in this game. And yet, the world is our oyster. We can defeat everyone else, save everyone, and become everyone's friend, and become partners with all the legendary Pokemon. Kieran's right, it's not fair. And the meaningful lesson behind his story is easy to get lost when we as the player are taught the complete opposite of what Kieran learns. Nemona tells us we're going to become a champion. We do exactly that. Arven tells us we're going to go collect all the Herba Mystica together. We do exactly that and save his dog. Penny tells us we're going to take down Team Star. And we not only do that, but somehow make everybody the best of friends again just because we went around battling people a lot. Which is why I stand by my Scarlet and Violet story rewrite and not everything just working out magically for the player. Arven tells us we're going to Area Zero together to stop what's going on there. We do exactly that. Briar says you've been chosen as an exchange student to Kitakami, so you go there and do what all the characters around you tell you to do, and you end up beating up the Walking Dead and befriending an ogre in the process. Cyrano invites you to BB Academy because one of the Kitakami friends recommended you. Drayton tells you to join the league, so you do that and mop up everyone. Kita tells you to research Area Zero, so you trek down into its depths and capture its hidden treasure. This character has zero agency of their own, instead just going along with what everyone else always tells them to do, and always living up to it without fail, always being that special someone who can do the impossible and surpass everyone's expectations at every twist and turn. It's not just Pokemon that does this. Of course, the main character of a story is most likely going to be able to surpass all the challenges presented to them, even if not initially, and eventually achieve the dream they've always hoped for. We as the player control these characters who see their goals through. Of course we're going to place ourselves into these characters and not say this random guard you just took out. Same goes for books and movies. It's all about these characters who face seemingly insurmountable challenges and manage to see their goals through. Not the random bad guy grunt, or some dude that just got blown up. The characters we take control of are the ones who surpass the challenges presented to them, often by having more power than the obstacles in their path, whatever form that power may take. These constant reiterations by media reinforce this main character syndrome that I would imagine so many feel, finding themselves like Kieran, that if they just put in enough work, the world will reciprocate, and experiencing frustration when it doesn't. We're taught that if we keep at it, we'll eventually succeed, achieve those goals we set our minds to, overcome any obstacles along the way. But frankly, the harsh reality is it's a naive way of thinking that can lead to obsession with a goal, losing sight of the journey, and feeling angry when things don't go our way, resorting to brute force when it doesn't seem like it's happening otherwise, and only hurting ourselves and others more in the process. Had I let frustration and entitlement take hold of me when I started testing for my 3rd degree black belt, and started committing everything I had single-mindedly towards that goal, chances are I would have found myself in the hospital rather than in physiotherapy. There's a healthy moderation to everything, and if you pursue your goals with an acceptance that it might not come to pass, then you can take pride in what it is you do achieve, and look back at how many incredible steps you have taken, as opposed to how many steps you are away from some grand goal, and being your own harshest critic in regards to whether or not you achieve it. I think this is an important lesson to take to heart, and I greatly respect the writers at Pokemon for frankly making one of the most thought-provoking and relatable characters I honestly might have ever seen in mainline Pokemon. However, I feel like this lesson is lost due to the fact that while we do see Kieran happy, we don't see him being truly proud of himself and what he's accomplished. He's just kind of content that his goals won't come to be. And we as the player are the complete opposite of Kieran. The game shows us that there are those who don't achieve these ultimate goals they put their minds towards, but that's never us, so why pay it a second thought? While a video game hero who doesn't see all their goals through is the much more uncommon approach compared to one who always finds a way to succeed, when your story is all about a character who doesn't achieve their goals, but that's one of the other characters while the player is taught that they'll never be faced with this problem, then does that undermine the lesson of your story? I'll leave that up to you to decide. But even with Kieran's story as an isolated experience, it still feels like it's missing this last significant arc. We have the first arc where he is trying to open every opportunity he can to begin his hero's journey, but it's not like he's committing everything he has, though he is putting in a strong effort. That doesn't work out, and he has to give up on that goal of his. So in the second arc, he starts committing everything he has, and only hurting himself and others in the process as he puts these expectations onto himself and others' shoulders. Things don't work out, and he has to acknowledge that he can't just expect things to always go the way that he expects them to. But that so doesn't feel like it should be the end of his story, that there should be this third arc where he begins to learn how to take pride in his accomplishments, because he truly has accomplished a lot that he should be proud of. But we don't ever really see him acknowledging that. We only see him in the part of the story where he's constantly focused on how far away he is from this goal, and how he's going to reach it, rather than being truly proud of himself for what it is he's done. Even in the epilogue that we'll talk about in just a moment here, we still see him beating himself up a little bit. He's accepted that this path that he's sought might not be the actual outcome, but it still doesn't feel like he's truly learned how to be happy with himself, even if the others around him are. It would have been a perfect opportunity to showcase this side of himself during the epilogue, during a third arc here. But what the epilogue ended up doing was something completely different. But before we get to that, there are some other story details we haven't addressed yet. First, let's just briefly talk about the Academy companion character side quests, which were in the main game, but I just never bothered doing until the DLC because of how done I was with this game by the end. So just pretend this is part of my main game essay or something. There are quests for Arven, Penny, and Nemona that consist of going and chatting with them a few times until they invite you to their room and tell you their goals. Nemona struggles to find strong opponents, but will keep on pushing herself to be stronger. Penny spies on the former leaders of Team Star, worried about them not fitting in, but sees them doing alright in the academy. Arven wants to do what he can to help people, and so he decides he's going to apply his abilities as a chef to do just that, like he did on our journey together. Wait, excuse me, what? The things you cooked were sandwiches. You don't cook sandwich. You can cook sandwich ingredients. I'm not sure how often plants are cooked as sandwich ingredients, unless Herba Mystica just so happens to be one of them. Also, your cooking isn't even good. If I recall, didn't you make the nasty patty that killed the health inspector? If all cooking a sandwich is in this world is this, you've gotta be the worst at it, Arven. Also, it wasn't even your cooking that healed Mabostiff, it was the Herba Mystica that was put between those two slices of bread. Also, need I remind you that 0 efforts were made to propagate this extremely rare plant with incredible medicinal properties. And now, Arven's going to use his cooking, the unrelated element to the thing that actually helped Mabostiff, to help others in the world the way he helped Mabostiff, when realistically his actions prior probably did more harm than good. What a great lesson to teach. For the Indigo Disk, it actually added a new Academy side quest. Team Star is struggling in school and needs some help, and they don't want Penny to know and offer to help because she's already done so much for them, so you agree to tutor them. It doesn't actually matter how well you tutor and help them. Heck, you could be the crummiest tutor ever. And I shan't waste a moment more on arithmetic. Ninja arts are where my focus should lie. That's right. I promise not to laugh, okay? What exactly did you mean earlier by raiding my base? So, how important do you think dreams are? This is an option? As Penny comes in at the end and just decides to help them. Why this wasn't part of the main game along with those other 3 character quests is beyond me. It kind of felt out of place for Indigo Disk content. Then, 1 month after the release of the Indigo Disk, a new epilogue was released for our mythical Pokemon, Petulant. Unlike many previous mythical Pokemon events, this is not a time-limited thing where you need to go into a physical location like a GameStop to have the content unlocked on your cartridge, which is nice. Also unlike previous Pokemon games though, it's DLC exclusive, meaning you need to have shelled out for an extra more than half of another game for access to it. Though, it does make sense as an epilogue to the DLC stories to be fair. To access this, you need to receive a mythical Pecha Berry from Mystery Gift, which, despite sounding like a shitpost, is real. as for what it does,
Nothing. Huh? You heard me. Nothing.
you need to have received this item to unlock the epilogue, but the item itself is meaningless. It's not even in your key items or anything. We go to Kitakami and start the epilogue by interacting in this shop. Not with the shopkeeper, but with this plush here. Don't you love how Pokemon for events at one time was like, I don't know, just learn Braille, dumbass? 2. Taking an item to the important place? That's too hard to figure out. Let's not release it. 2. Go to this one specific shop in the DLC area to interact with something that has given you 0 indications of being interactable and literally just looks like part of the environment. Pokemon knows how common it is to just Google what to do online nowadays, and so doesn't hesitate to make what the player has to do the most obscure stuff imaginable. They've regressed back to the old ways, because people will just share the answer online anyway. Something we'll talk about more in the gameplay chapter, and later in story here, considering the actual story of this mythical Pokemon isn't expressed in the epilogue, but rather in a video upload to the Pokemon YouTube channel a week later, but we'll get into that when we get to that. Kieran calls us back to Kitakami, and has already purchased a plane ticket for you, further exemplifying the player character truly has no will on their own and is just subject to the whims of what everyone around them decides for them. Not only has he purchased a plane ticket for us, but for 3 friends, just in case 3 friends might want to come along too. This child is making me feel insecure about my financial situation.
Isn't this great?
So, the characters who decided for us they were our friends in main game Scarlet and Violet come along to Kitakami. Nemona and Kieran battle, with Nemona winning and Kieran continuing to feel kinda bad about his abilities, but Nemona encouraging him about how awesome he was. Then internet brain-rotted Carmine appears as she starts Fortnite dancing on the haters. And we bring her back home. Apparently, this started shortly after Kieran wrote you the letter, though it probably would have made more sense to be before it was written so Kieran could ask for your help with her, but we're going to ignore that and go have a slumber party in the community hall. TV remote has been missing for a while, and the characters want to find it to switch the TV to something else, maybe a better game. Nemona searches outside, and we find the TV remote planted in a pot where it could one day become a big beautiful TV tree. Kieran and we decide to look for Nemona, with Arvin and Penny staying behind in case she comes back. Realistically, you only need one person to stay behind in case of that. Also, how big do we expect Nemona's TV remote search radius to be anyway? We head outside and are confronted by more default dances, who we promptly defeat. Nemona runs off towards Kitakami Hall, and we pursue. Kieran's grandparents are waiting out front. Grandma offers Gramps some mochi, which he eats, and then goes crazy as well, challenging us to a battle. After we win, Arvin calls us back to the community hall, because it seems something's going terribly wrong. At this point, the game expects us to book it straight back to the community center, and not check out the Mask Festival where everything is still completely normal despite the whole town below being brainwashed, and Grandma clearly showing that those brainwashed try to brainwash others. But nah, they're just gonna sit here in front of the festival doing nothing, and the festival remains completely unchanged, because a player would never come here to check it out if the game clearly just told them to come back to town. Emergence doesn't happen in the play of video games. We make it back, and turns out it's nothing, get pranked. Oh, wait, it's something! Petulant comes out and fires mochi like those foam Nerf discs straight into Arvin and Penny's mouths, brainwashing them to either do the chicken dance or just chest thrusts for Arvin, and we battle them. We then make off for Nemona and Petulant by Loyalty Plaza, which I genuinely don't understand how happened routing-wise. We're tasked with battling Nemona while Kieran holds off the hordes of people by staring at them. For a reminder of the Switch's capabilities, in the final boss of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, spoilers, the game has a party of 7 characters actively fighting the final boss, and a full-on aerial battle playing out in the skies above us we can look up and view. Here, Kieran just kind of stares down the Fortnite squad. Use your imagination that they're battling. Again, some totally went through Scarlet and Violet without any issues at all. Oh man, I can't hold out much longer. I haven't finished it, Harmonia. What are you doing? You're not even doing anything. There's nothing happening back there. Also, the amount of people default dancing actually slows down the game. Look, it's slowing down. Ooh, I'm noticing. Now's your chance. Catch it in a Pokeball. Oh, I can. We defeat Nemona and then battle and catch Petulant. Kieran doesn't seem opposed to you catching special Pokemon anymore, though it might have been neat if there were 2 Petronts and he caught one. Give him a little victory in one of the key ways he wanted by showing that if you keep at it, you will eventually have those little victories, even if it isn't the exact way you wanted, rather than the message being possible to interpret as, give up on your dreams. But Petront is caught, the day is saved, the epilogue is complete. I do wish that it helped to better wrap up Kieran's character by showing him taking some joy in what he is capable of, but Kieran remains pretty much unchanged from the end of the Indigo Disk. As for the story of Petront, the game never actually tells us. It implies a connection with Ogerpon and the Loyal 3 since they all react if sent out in battle against it, but it never actually tells us anything. You better be following the Pokemon YouTube or Twitter, X or whatever, if you want to know what the story of this thing actually is. Petront was taken care of by an elderly couple, and it gave them mochi that apparently brings out people's greed and makes them desire their, well, desires even more. Wait, I thought it took control of people. Isn't that why it spread around the mochi and got people to spread it more? Are you telling me the desires of every person we saw in the epilogue is either battling or sharing tasty mochi? I don't get it. The elderly couple kept asking Petront for more things, and eventually asked it for some kick-ass masks. So Petront set off for Kitakami, recruiting the Loyal 3 as retainers along the way. They sneak into the cave and steal the masks, but the man shows up and fights them. They end up killing or mortally wounding the dude, but he's able to protect one mask. Don't know how they didn't just take it from him at that point. I'll just presume that they were severely injured in the battle as well and needed to retreat, and that the man could still put up a little bit of a fight before he croaked if he wanted. They make off with 3 of the masks, but then here comes Ogerpon, who's pissed, and clubs the 3 to death, and Petront goes into its shell and rolls away, one day being picked up by the Kitakami shopkeeper, I suppose. Hold on, why didn't Ogerpon just take back the 3 masks here? Maybe the real treasure was the thieves it killed with its right to bear arms along the way. And wait, doesn't this show an open field with no people around whatsoever? I was under the impression this took place in a more populated area. The villagers saw what happened and feared Ogerpon, and Ogerpon took off in fear of the people shortly after doing this, and that's why the masks were left behind. No, apparently this took place in some field while some villagers watched from afar like, write that down, write that down! Ogerpon just left its precious masks there on the ground so that the DLC plot could happen the way it did. The villagers took the masks and put them in the hall, and turned the Loyal 3 into an integral part of their whole culture. Not Petront though. I do have to say, the animation of this video was actually really cool, but the fact that this exposition doesn't exist anywhere in-game as far as I'm aware, and instead requires you to go to YouTube, is just not a good means of storytelling. And the things you need to assume about what happened for everything to fit together, like Ogerpon just leaving the masks there, doesn't make any narrative sense. It betrays Ogerpon's entire character, I would figure. So, yeah, this epilogue was a thing, I guess. To be fair, it's not like Pokemon mythical events have ever been all that story-heavy. Often just go somewhere, get some lore, catch the Pokemon. But this was full-on marketed as an epilogue. I held out some hope it might wrap up Kieran's character or leave him on a more positive note. It did indeed expand on the storytelling on the DLC in regards to Ogerpon and the Loyal 3. Well, if you watch it on YouTube at least. This epilogue story that led up to catching a new mythical Pokemon was no Delta episode, that's for sure. For the gameplay, we're only going to discuss what's new, since we already extensively covered the gameplay of the main game. If there was something good, it's still good. If there was something bad, it's still bad. The Teal Mask features you going to the locations the game tells you to, and doing a battle from time to time. That's it, really. There is a minigame you unlock where you run Koraidon or Miraidon through balloons that I honestly forgot even existed until I went through cutscene movies of the DLC to remind myself of the story. Ogerpon is a multi-phase boss battle, which is kinda neat. That's it. That's really it for the main gameplay of the Teal Mask. The optional content is challenging higher levels of the Ogre ousting, the balloon minigame that is, and defeating some side quest trainers. Assuming you didn't defeat a lot of trainers in Paldea and or waited for the patch a month later to make the trainers actually beatable, what with the whole no more than 300 trainers are defeatable situation. One interesting aspect they added here, which I only played long after I was done with Indigo Disk, and I honestly forgot to add to my script, so I'm just gonna wing it here, is Perrin's questline. Unfortunately, to do the quest for Perrin, you need to have filled your dex to a certain amount. So, one immense struggle with Pokemon Home later that we'll delve into a little bit later in the gameplay chapter, and I was able to see what her quest was all about. Turns out we're playing new Pokemon Snap out here, as we go around snapping photos of Pokemon in the forest trying to photograph different species. Photo, let me see. Oh, this picture doesn't contain a single... Really? Are you sure? Look. Pseudo Wudo. Let me see. I think the machine can get much from images so small. Can't you get closer? And when I was playing through this, what I honestly thought was the Pokemon spawn rates made this actually interesting. I needed to search for the Pokemon instead of them just swarming around me, popping in like plagues of locusts that I've been condemned to like the sinner I am. No, as opposed to them just popping in around you and just wandering around aimlessly, they would actually be rarer finds. You needed to actually search for them, and when you'd find them, they would be typically naturally existing in their environment. This is what I wanted so badly in the main game Scarlet and Violet essay. Ever since I was a little kid playing the Pokemon games and walking through the tall grass and randomly finding wild Pokemon, I had thought, man, wouldn't it be so cool once video games get to the point that I can actually search for them out in the world and they actually exist naturally out in the world, kind of like they do in the anime? But nowadays, in that day and age when that is easily possible, it's not done. Instead, it's just no matter where you run, there's gonna be Pokemon constantly popping in around you like Enderman as you face the Ender Dragon. This never felt like a living, breathing world. It felt like an artificial path that has been designed to just hand you Pokemon over and over and over again. But in the Perrin questline, it did feel like they were actually living in this world. You had to seek them out, find them in their natural habitat, up to activities that this species would normally be up to. It's a shame that this random questline about taking photos of Pokemon is what I hoped the main game would actually be in terms of finding Pokemon to catch. Anyway, after you photographed enough Pokemon, you get to face down Blood Moon Ursaluna. Whoa, it's that Pokemon from the hit game, Pokémon Legends Arceus, that came out like forever ago. Man, it's so awesome that they put in this nod to a classic game. I assume this is just another one of those situations of trying to garner player interest in, hey, what is this Pokemon? Looking it up and finding that you can get it in Pokémon Legends Arceus. It's a Pokemon from that game. Well, not this specific form, but Ursaluna in general, that is. But yeah, overall, not a bad questline, just due to the fact that it's what I want modern Pokemon to be. We'll see if Pokemon Legends Z-A changes in that regard, but for now, I'll just remain a little skeptical after Legends Arceus. Back to my script here, Indigo Disk on the other hand, there's a lot more to talk about. Every trainer battle here is double battles, and not like your generic, here's a random double battle against some kids with like a Plusle and Minun or something. No, they actually strategize. Let's look at Pokemon Coliseum for a hot sec. I've owned the game for a long time, but only played it all the way through shortly after finishing the main story of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Every battle in that was a double battle, and some of the later ones especially got really crazy, like the skill swap slacking. The game actually makes itself really challenging at times, but there were some complaints I had with it. The game is almost nothing but battle after battle after battle, with you only getting a short cutscene every 1 to 3 hours it felt like, so it would get really repetitive and draining. Double battles do a lot to mix things up. It would have been a lot harder to keep up the motivation to play had it been singles, but still, the sheer number of battles. The game makes itself difficult enough that if you're not using the legendary dogs the game makes available to you, then you've really shot yourself in the foot. The game balance feels geared around relying on them. And the game's difficulty also expects you at times to engage in lots of optional battles to gain experience and levels, adding to the slog even more. And when I say a lot of optional battles, I don't just mean like trainers that are potentially avoidable on the way to your objective, No, I mean go back to previous areas where everyone is fightable again, and I'll clear the entire area again, kind of optional trainers. I got so bored of both Colosseum and Scarlet and Violet that there came a time I just played both at once to make both more bearable. I did generally enjoy Colosseum at the end of the day, but those were the key complaints I had with its gameplay, and for reference, I've yet to play XD Gale of Darkness, and it might be a hot second before I can because there's so many games I want to play and not enough time. Indigo Disk, on the other hand here, didn't feel like it expected you to use the most busted Pokemon imaginable. Heck, there's even a part later it challenges you to use a random wild Pokemon you caught there we'll talk about more later. And despite that, it wasn't exactly a cakewalk either. The battles were actual challenges, but not so much so that it feels like you need to bench the Pokemon you like using. The difficulty was actually really well handled, and by being double battles, it adds so much more depth over singles that it makes it a much more engaging experience in my opinion. It honestly makes me want a full mainline Pokemon game that had doubles for every battle. I'd love to know what that would look like, because that might actually be really fun. The Elite Four battles all come with their own trials to complete before you can battle the gym leader. None of them really employ any major minigame specific mechanics like the main game did, apart from the flying one, which is a tool that gets added to your regular arsenal later, which, hey, at least means no more game-breaking minigame specific physics.
Bring out the op!
Lacey gives you a quiz, which, as far as I can tell, has no consequences, so just select answers until you get it. Crispin wants you to make a spicy sandwich, but you only start out with a few ingredients, and you need to battle or trade with other nearby trainers to get other ingredients. X is the button to check your current ingredients, and if you thought for a second, wait, isn't X the menu button? Well, you'd be correct. It overrides the menu button, replacing it with the ingredient menu for the duration of the challenge. This means if you want to manage your Pokemon in some way, like changing who your 2 Pokemon being sent out for doubles are, well, you're out of luck. The moment you start the trial, your Pokemon formation is locked in all the way through to the Crispin battle, because screw you, I guess. They really couldn't have just overwritten the map button or something here, because it's not like you'd need map access while locked into this small area. It was specifically the menu button they decided to take away from you, because the potato salad whispered in Game Freak's ear and told them to do it. Amiris introduces you to the new free-flying feature that's, of course, DLC exclusive, by presenting you with a really easy flight tutorial disguised as a challenge. Also, you won't actually be able to free fly around until you beat the DLC and talk to her again. Also, it's another one of those things that works about as well as it looks like it does. Drayton's is the most interesting, where he challenges you to battle a few trainers using only Pokemon you caught in the Terrarium. The needing to go around catching Pokemon to form a team can be a smidge of a grind if you just want to get on with the Elite Four challenge, but using random Pokemon I caught as best I could proved to be genuinely interesting and fun. I made sure to catch several ice types since he's the dragon type Elite Four, but turns out that doesn't even matter because the challenge trainer types is just whatever. So get pranked, I caught a bunch of ice types I didn't even need. Also, while you can have a party of 6, each trainer only has 2 Pokemon, so it's really not much of a challenge. When you defeated the last trainer, Drayton says you can now battle him, and you can swap out your party for your normal Pokemon, unless you want to battle him with a random wild Pokemon you caught. And anybody around this channel for a while knows I don't back down from a challenge, so I battled him with this wild Pokemon team I caught. Luckily, the AI in this game doesn't really seem to swap out Pokemon, or know how Perish Song works, so... The Indigo Disk introduces BBQs, or whatever the battle points are called. Complete side quests to gain points you can use to unlock new features like throwing styles or call people to the academy. When you go to unlock things like throwing forms, however, the game gives you no preview for the thing you're buying, so you'll only know what it is after you've spent your points on it. Better hope it's good. The people you invite, you apparently need to do several times for them to want to trade a Pokemon with you, as well as unlocking new people to invite, or something or other. It's something complicated I never took the time to really delve into because it's pretty grindy. As for actually getting these points, you must complete tasks in the Terrarium. Except you'll come to find you start getting the same tasks repeating over and over again. Take a photo of a swimming Pokemon. Shane, this is the 7th time you've asked the class to find a swimming Pokemon. And any photos you take for these challenges get saved to your Switch camera roll. So if you want your album a bit more organized, you need to go deleting photos from your album post-playing. I can't tell you how many photos I have of Pokemon that are swimming added to my Switch album at this point. It eventually just becomes more of a chore than anything, and I don't even want to imagine how long it takes to 100% this DLC by unlocking everything points can unlock. MELOETTA. Dear Arceus, I don't care pronunciation, how convoluted you are to get. Getting MELOETTA is not a difficult task by any means. It's just one of the most obscure things Pokemon has ever done, and that's saying something. You need to go to this specific area in the coastal biome where there's a small cyclone of leaves. Stop near it, spin for at least 10 seconds, open the camera app, and change to the sepia filter. You know what? Fuck it, just teach me Braille. There was a time Pokemon did the most obscure stuff, and then they were like, alright, we should make things a lot simpler to ensure everybody can actually do it. And nowadays they're like, hey, the internet exists, therefore if even one person can figure it out, then everybody has it. And that's the excuse to make some of the most impossible to figure out solutions to things. Don't know how to get MELOETTA? You're almost certainly not figuring it out, just Google it. Don't know how to start the Epilogue? Just Google it, and you'll find you need to interact with this decorative-looking stuffy thing. Don't know what connection Pecharunt has to the Teal Mask plot? Well, best hope you're following Pokemon's social media accounts to get the answer on that in an actually really well-produced video, because you're not getting that in-game. When we're playtesting video games at my university, we make sure that as developers, we don't tell the player what they have to do. Ensure the game is feasible for the player to figure out on their own, rather than getting frustrated and giving up. Elden Ring's DLC is actually a really good example of that. It seems at first like it'd be something really convoluted, like where the heck do I go in this big open space? But just by randomly dicking around, I eventually found my way through. There's this path that's blocked off. I guess I'm not going through here for now. I make it to this tree. It says it can be burned with Mesmer's flame. Alright, I need someone named Mesmer. I have no idea who the heck Mesmer is. Let's just randomly run around until I find him. Oh, here he is, up in the castle. I beat him up, take his flame, I can burn that tree, and I can get into the place from before. And I mean, in that case, sure, I could have Googled it anywhere along the way, but it's a kind of game where if you just keep on exploring around enough, you'll eventually find it. Pokemon, on the other hand, figures they're such a huge IP. There's always going to be countless people talking about it, so we can make information as obscure as possible and hope that instead of getting frustrated and giving up, players will get frustrated and Google it, and then use the answer to keep on playing. It's honestly one of the laziest ways to give the player information, by putting the task of researching it onto the players and trusting that they'll collectively figure it out and share the answers among themselves. That's not our responsibility to make it feasible for an average player to figure it out. I don't mind things being a bit hidden to encourage sharing of information. I remember people telling me that there was this crazy Pokemon I could get if I went to this cave in Pokemon Diamond. But that's only just hidden enough that a lot of people are still going to find it, and then share it around with their own small network. It took players several days after launch to figure out how to get MELOETTA, which might not seem like very long, but for the highest grossing media IP, meaning an IP with an incredibly large player base, to have content nobody knows how to access even after days of throwing everything against the wall, then that is a significantly obscure bit of content. Snackworth and the legendary Pokemon. As you complete quests, Snackworth will award you with legendary Pokemon snacks, which gets them to spawn out in the world. Except these legendary Pokemon have random IVs, as opposed to at least 3 perfect IVs, as is usually the case for legendary Pokemon. So the stats you're actually getting on them is worse than they'd otherwise be. I've seen mention of this being due to an oversight in the programming, but couldn't find any confirmation of this. Some are actually happy with this difference, as there are some cases in competitive Pokemon where you want certain stats to be as low as possible, such as the lowest possible attack on a special attacking Pokemon in case a foe uses Foul Play on you, which uses your attack stat against you. And random IVs greatly increases your chances of getting a 0 in the stat you want when it's not maxed half the time, which helps to lower the high bar for entry into competitive, without cheating that is. But I'd say that this is more of an issue with the game design itself. The fact that you can use bottle caps to max IVs, but not minimize them, with Game Freak assuming people would only want IVs to be the highest possible value, really feeling like they don't understand their competitive players. Sure, the crappier IVs just so happen to be a small band-aid fix to this big wound, but there still exists this massive RNG grind to get into competitive these games have made almost no effort to alleviate, and outside of lowering that grind just a tad, this change gives you a worse Pokemon you otherwise need to put more work into for perfect IVs you'd have gotten in series past. As well, even if you have both game versions and both DLCs, which again, like Sword and Shield, is a separate purchase for each game, you can't catch all the available legendaries without engaging in multiplayer, because some Pokemon are group quest exclusive. Worth noting, though, that even with one game, you can get all the Snacksworth legendaries, as doing group quests, the multiplayer quests, allows you to get version exclusives from the other game. But one of the real kickers, every single legendary Pokemon in this game is shiny locked. If your cup of tea is spending the post-game shiny hunting legendary Pokemon like you could in Sword and Shield, heck, even in Bugged Diamond and Shipped Pearly, even though for some reason in that game the shiny charm only affected breeding because it's a perfect game, something I didn't know during the BDSP essay. So if you're hoping to get some super cool recolors, then that's too bad.
Show's over, cheapskate!
And then when we look at the actual amount of content here, we find it's far less than Sword and Shield. Here's a graphic I spent longer than I care to admit putting together, illustrating the difference in available legendaries between each set of games. The crossed out sparkle means the Pokemon is shiny locked, which, as you can see in Sword and Shield, it's the new Gen 8 ones, the mythical Keldeo, the gift type Null, Poipole, and Cosmog for some reason. Whereas in Scarlet and Violet, it's all of them. I don't count Walking Wake, Iron Leaves, Mewtwo, or Mew in the tallies at the bottom for Scarlet and Violet, because if you're watching this video and you want to catch these Pokemon, you can't! They're time exclusive and the chance is gone. Sucks to suck. So, these are the tallies of Pokemon that you can still obtain in each game. Worth noting, I count Ultra Beasts and the new Paradox Trios as legendaries, since that's essentially what the games treat them as anyway. Regieleki and Regidrago, as well as Glacier and Spectrier, I count as 2, because even though you can only obtain one or the other, it's still part of the pool of total available Pokemon. Cubfu, though, I only count as 1, even though it has 2 evolutions. If you want to count both, then just add 1 to both totals, since it's available in both games. The total legendaries in Sword and Shield, including its DLC, is 70, which is all of them at the time, save for Mythicals, apart from Keldeo. Whereas Scarlet and Violet is 42. The number of legendaries Sword and Shield has that Scarlet and Violet does not have is 45. And the number of legendaries that Scarlet and Violet has that Sword and Shield does not have is 17. I definitely did not retake this later because I didn't know what numbers were the first time. Sword and Shield has more legendaries that Scarlet and Violet does not have than Scarlet and Violet has in total. Wow. Most of these exclusives are new ones introduced by these respective games. So if we don't count the new generation legendaries, that makes 38 old legendaries Sword and Shield has over Scarlet and Violet, and MELOETTA that Scarlet and Violet has over Sword and Shield. Also, this is kinda odd, but Scarlet and Violet includes the Sword and Shield new DLC legendaries, except for Calyrex and the new Galarian forms of the legendary birds. It has Cubfu and Calyrex's steeds, but no Calyrex. And then finally, the non-shiny locked legendaries in Sword and Shield is 56, and in Scarlet and Violet is 0. Also worth noting, in Sword and Shield, the shiny charm has no effect on the Regi line because screw Regi shiny hunters for some reason. Also, despite the fact that all legendaries are shiny locked, these uncatchable Ditto blocks are not.
You can't even catch it. Wait,
So, in terms of legendary Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet, we are getting far less content, worse quality content, 0 chances of any shinies, all for a price that's been marked up by just
$5.
So, if you like legendary Pokemon, you really don't have any reason to play Scarlet and Violet over Sword and Shield. And then you can invest that $5 difference in today's sponsor, me. Let's see you keep that trim for Fucker Day. The new Stellar Terra type. If a Pokemon terastallizes into it, they retain their normal typing defensively. Offensively, it gives boosts only the first time you use a move of a certain type. If you use a move of the same type that Pokemon has, then it's a 2 times boost the first time, as it would be if you terastallize into that type, but then it drops down to the normal 1.5 times stab bonus thereafter. If you use a move of a type you're not, then it's a 1.2 times boost the first time and normal damage after. Wait, really? It's less than half the stab bonus? So yeah, plus 50% power for each base type move used for the first time, and plus 20% power for each non-base type move used for the first time. If the Pokemon uses Terra Blast or Terra Sandstorm, this will deal stellar damage, which is super effective against terastallized Pokemon, and will get the 20% boost the first time only. The damage boost lasts indefinitely in Terra raid battles, which makes it a good type to have on a Pokemon you're grinding raids with. Overall though, it feels kind of underwhelming, which, I mean, fair enough considering it wouldn't exactly be right to make something so good you have no reason to use any other Terra types ever again. It does give a counter to Pokemon who become really good defensively when terastallized, so perhaps competitive players could keep Stellar type on one of their Pokemon geared to be a terastallized foe killer just in case. I haven't played competitive Pokemon in a long time though, so I'm not really sure about its viability, but from what I've seen, it doesn't look like it's all that widely used. The Synchro Machine is a new addition that lets you take control of your Pokemon. Well, at least moving around and attacking. There's not even like a jump button or anything. I've seen a lot of people say that this is such a huge thing the developers must have gone so far out of their way to do, but it was already programmed in the game. It's called Auto Battle. I'm sure in testing they were probably using manual inputs to control Pokemon here to make sure it worked before giving it to the Pokemon AI they made. All they'd have to do is implement that dev tool as an in-game feature. It is a nice addition. Apparently it really helps those who shiny hunt from what I've heard. But just moving around and a basic attack that locks in your position until the attack is through just feels really robotic-y, I find, and makes me wish I was just playing Pokepark instead. Now, returning to Best Girl Perrin for a hot second, after you've filled each of the dexes enough, in addition to that Teal Mask photo shoot that we can do, we unlock information about the Paradox Legendaries. She shows you photos of a little smidgen of them that have been spotted in Area 0. I don't know who the heck is snapping these photos if this is such an off-limits area that you need special permission from the champion to be able to go to, but I mean, hey, what do I know? And once you're shown these photos, they spawn there. The idea is that you use the photos to try and discern where they are. So I try to do this in the intended way without just Googling where they are. The giraffe took me not too long to find, but I thought for sure it was at this one specific river area, and it wasn't, it was at a different place. American Entei, however, took me a decent bit longer to find. Like, this could have just been whatever cliff here, so I just went around inspecting them all until I eventually found him jittering over there like a maniac. Oh, man. I find it, and there it is, jittering away. Well, we've run into this bug yet again, where the Pokemon don't quite work. The DLC added more available Pokemon to the games, bringing the total unavailable Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet to 292. We've gone through this before, assuming all the data on the cartridges is Pokemon alone, math, yada yada. Skull space on the existing cartridge or one cartridge size up, and people more familiar with the data than me have told me the true Pokemon data size is a bit over 1 megabyte, and that 810 Pokemon on the 3DS was about 1.24 gigabytes. So it's more than feasible to have them all. Pokemon just likes selling more games and more home subscriptions. We've been through this whole song and dance before, so we're not going to go through the math this time. One could make the argument that now they're actually making changes to the models, so it's no longer as easy as just importing what they had before, since they actually need to change up the models. But let's say that in one console generation, filled with mainline Pokemon games, every Pokemon is available across that total pool of games. There is not any Pokemon that is impossible to have on the console. There is at least a game somewhere on the console where they exist. Would it not then make sense for the highest grossing media IP to make the quality of models they want for all Pokemon of that console generation of Pokemon to be used across all their games, if they're all going to have to be made for one of these games at some point anyway? And then, if they did that, why not include them in each of the games considering the minuscule space the data takes? Because then you don't get to sell as many games and services. We already see evidence of this in the fact that there's lots of Legends Arceus Pokemon, the game where they started touching up the models, that are unavailable in Scarlet and Violet, something we talked about in the main game Scarlet and Violet essay. I feel it's important to bring up in each of these video essays though to do what I can towards preventing acceptance of it. Believe me, I get plenty of comments like, "You're still going on about the national decks?" Yes, because companies that make anti-consumer decisions such as these thrive on acceptance of the issue. It's something I've talked about in my video essays regarding Nintendo's stance on their legacy content. They'll roll out something like their NES and SNES games, only available behind their now paid online subscription service. People don't like it at first, but eventually come to accept it. N64 and Genesis games are going to be available now, but only at an additional subscription service price they're going to inflate the value of by throwing some game DLCs in there too, whether you play them or not. People don't really seem to like it at first, but eventually come to accept it. Game Boy Advance games are available now too, under the same extra subscription to further justify its inflated price. New games trickle out at such a slow rate, and barely capture even a shred of the total libraries that were originally available on these consoles. Nintendo rolls out glorified HD ports at full price of some of their legacy games they refuse to sell to you any other way. Some pushback, at least for 3D All-Stars, but then acceptance and wicked sales. Companies like this who make anti-consumer decisions thrive on rolling them out at a slow enough pace to foster acceptance so they can keep on slowly turning up the temperature for the theoretical frog boiling in water. So I'll just keep on bringing it up.
So that means I can battle with Cinderace again!
Your luck just ran out!
When it comes to Pokemon Home, I was reminded of some more details of the service when I needed to use it to complete major parts of the decks to get the Beast and the Giraffe. I got a 1-month subscription, auto-renew was on by default, and if you want to unsubscribe, you have to find the option tucked away in the strangely laggy for basic menus Nintendo Switch Online menu. You know, I've been messing around in the menus here for a little while, just as I'm doing this recording where I just wanted to gather footage of showing the menus being kind of laggy here. And for one, it is actually being a lot less laggy than I remember it being when I first got the home subscription, just for like the playthrough, like the single month thingamabob. I swear it was lagging twice this much that time. Like, it's still not amazing. Maybe it was the game that I had open. I have Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door open right now. Like, maybe that's not as major. But the main reason I wanted to speak up during this recording is I also wanted to find the place where you can unsubscribe from additional subscriptions. And I can't even find it anymore. I don't remember how I did it. I know I had to Google it, but I genuinely don't know where the menu was. How to unsubscribe from Pokemon Home. Bear with me here. Tap your name, then tap subscriptions. Is that... Am I missing something here? What do you mean tap my name? I don't know what you mean. This is nintendosupport.com. Welcome to Nintendo Support. How to manage automatic renewal settings for a Pokemon Home Premium Plan subscription. No, get these cookies out of here. Automatic renewal can only be canceled through Nintendo eShop on it. Oh, it's not even here. I'm looking in the wrong place. Here. This is the place. That's why I can't find it. It's in the Nintendo eShop, not the that. Okay, so it was tap my name? Yeah, so it wouldn't be anything here. This is all stuff with the shop. Oh, and this is much laggier. Oh my goodness. I swear I pressed up like 3 years ago. Oh my god. So tap my name. So come on, is this supposed to be my name? Is that what's going on here? I hit A like, okay, there we go. I hit it a while ago. Typical Nintendo menus on the Switch, right? Cut out that part because I don't want to be showing any of that information. Okay, so it would be here under your subscriptions and available passes. What's a pass? Do I get like a free pass? And then that's where you change membership and stuff here. And I guess you can check your expansion pack content. Free download when I'm not even part of the thingamabob. Like, what do you mean free download when I haven't even subscribed to that? Anyway, that's where you find the menu for turning off automatic renewal / just completely turning off your Pokemon are being held at ransom in case you don't want that anymore. Like pretty much any other subscription service out there, the hope in its design is that a significant portion of revenue will come from those who subscribe and forget to unsubscribe. Which, hey, by the way, if you want to subscribe and forget to unsubscribe from me, at least that's free. As well, like pretty much any other subscription service out there, it is so much harder to unsubscribe than it is to subscribe, which I honestly don't even think should be legal. I have no doubt that that's where a significant portion of revenue comes from those that either forget to unsubscribe or are too frustrated to unsubscribe. And it's one of the reasons why I really hate subscription services. So, after solving Where's Waldo hard mode, I made sure I was only paying for 1 month and got to work. It seemed like my living dex was still mostly in Pokemon Shield version, as I transferred to Sword and then to Shield to get myself the Shiny Charm in both games. An item I didn't know at the time had zero effect on the Pokemon I was looking for. If you multi-select in Pokemon Home and try to place your selection in a game, if there is even one Pokemon that isn't available in the target game, it cancels your whole selection. Doesn't even place in the ones that are allowed. So in Sword and Shield, I went through the Pokedex of those games. Alright, I need that evolution line. Let's track it down, transfer it. What's the next evolution line I need? Rinse and repeat. Because of that, my Pokemon were a bit all over the place in Shield. So, gathering everything I had and putting it all back in Living Dex order, that took over 4 hours. I did not want to go through that again for Scarlet and Violet. So, this time, I didn't even look up the DLC decks. I just transferred literally everything the game let me transfer, and in the exact same box order. So when I was done, I could just multi-select them back into the Living Dex order, which took under 1 hour. Massive time save compared to the old strategy, but still, a lot of time to fill the decks with Pokemon I already have. If Pokemon's going to charge as much as they do for their subscription service, you'd think maybe it would have some sort of integration with the games in question, like a setting you can toggle to automatically fill the decks with Pokemon you have in Home, or if Home have more ease of use features for those with things like living dexes, like an organized Pokemon by dex number kind of feature. Nope, it's all a very basic service that I never enjoy using. Generation 9 marked the games I stopped developing my living dex at because of how much I dislike using Home. But because this one quest needed my dex filled, it seems I had to call on my old living dex one last time. This experience with Home only made my opinion of it and the integration of Pokemon from one game to another even worse. I've known about the Great Move Purge for a while, where so many Pokemon moves cease to exist, and so would be taken off Pokemon when transferring them to games without those moves. Turns out, that actually really screwed me. I wanted my Pokemon catching Pokemon, Smeargle, IV bred, EV trained, Pulse Swipe, Spore, Soak, Heal Block. Turns out, Heal Block doesn't exist anymore. I put that into Scarlet and Violet, then that's getting deleted. So if I want to stop really annoying Pokemon like Ho from healing themselves by spamming Recover, there's not much I can do apart from wait for them to run out of PP. Isn't that fun? Oh well, at least the other moves will still be useful. If Heal Block doesn't exist in Scarlet and Violet, that means the Smeargle will come with Heal Block deleted, right? It deleted all my moves. Fuck off, Pokemon. So, if I wanted to make my Pokemon catching Smeargle, I would have to set it up all the way again. All the stats are still great, it's still EV trained, IV bred and all that, but I don't even know how you do that. In Generation 6, how I did it was I would find a wild Smeargle, I would use the move that I wanted my Smeargle to learn on the Smeargle, it would sketch it, and then therefore that's the only move that it can know. Then I send out my Smeargle, and I sketch it off of the wild Smeargle that sketched it off of me. That's how I did it. I don't know if there's wild Smeargles in this game. I don't know if I can even do that. So if I wanted to set up that Pokemon catching build again, I don't know that I even could. Or I probably could. It might just be the biggest pain in the ass ever. So yeah, there's that. Also, when I transferred a bunch of Mons around, a couple had this question mark that said, it might not be transferable. Huh? Why? What? Luckily, it did transfer, but it was really weird that it told me it might not, and without any indicated reason as to why. I also want to quickly add to this whole stance of Nintendo's towards their classic games, where they could easily make them available on a virtual console type format on the Switch, but instead choose to put them behind a subscription service with a library that pales to even their previous generation virtual console, and Pokemon's stance towards being able to manage all your different Pokemon being locked to a subscription service because there's no way you can have them all. It really reminds me of that one Ubisoft exec that was making headlines with the claim that gamers need to get used to not owning their games. The gaming industry has picked up on how profitable subscription services are, and so they would like to slowly move more and more towards these models. Pay us regularly for access to this library, the contents of which are subject to change, which means you can also lose your save files and abilities to play certain games if they're pulled. Something devastating to those with even a modicum of care for game preservation. And you don't own your games. We get the final say. You don't own your Pokemon. We do. We'll do whatever we want with it. You don't own your derivative work of Pokemon. We do. We'll do whatever we want with it. There are even platforms where you do purchase games, but still don't own them, such as Steam, who can take away your games anytime if they'd like. The model of subscription services, consumers not owning the products they're paying for, and games as a service is the direction the industry would like to go to maintain the highest control over their products. Remember, legally, at the end of the day, your Pokemon and your work regarding Pokemon isn't yours. Visuals and aesthetics is typically where we talk about both the visuals and the glitches, since that ties into the aesthetic experience, I would argue. I honestly don't feel like there's a lot to say about the world visually in a general sense, because it's the same as Scarlet and Violet pretty much. If you haven't, check out that video, because it's still the same late GameCube, early Wii looking game. You know what, as I'm editing this, I take that back actually, that's an insult to GameCube games. Kitakami I don't find particularly interesting. Island with a mountain in the center, so it's basically just Paldea again, but smaller. The BB League is a pretty neat idea, the whole underwater terrarium with the different environments. I personally think it would have been neat to see biome transitions, rather than the flashbanged by Minecraft separators for the biomes. Also, we can't even go up to see the glass of the dome. There's this massive unused space between the playable area and the wall, which is not at all cost-effective for such a construction underwater, but I guess Unova's just stupid rich from all the fast food they sell there or something. But how cool would it have been to be able to go up to the glass and see water-type Pokemon swimming around outside? Recording this dedicated clip for this, it looks like there's stars underwater here, which, I assume that's just like a fake screen. I guess we're just in like the Truman Show here. It's just simulating what the sky is supposed to look. But then, what's the point in this being underwater then? When we're actually in the dome, we don't have this visual context that puts us underwater. The game just says, it's underwater, please believe us. Look, here it is from the surface, it must be true. But I found on playing that I often forget this place was supposed to be underwater, because there's no visual tie-in that tells us this. If you're in a space station in a game, you should be able to look outside and see the universe around you. If you're on a mountaintop, you should be able to look around and see the world around you. If you're underwater, you should be able to look out and see the ocean around you. Otherwise, what's even the point of being inside this space we're told is located in a really cool and unique place if we never actually get to see the context of that and instead just have to take the game's word for it? You know, usually when people say show, don't tell, they're talking about characters in a story, showing motivations through actions rather than just telling their motivations or what happened. But this is one of the few instances where I see a world guilty of telling rather than showing. This is a really cool underwater dome, just take our word for it. It's genuinely an embarrassing regard for quality from any AAA game producer. It would happen sometimes in Kitakami, but I found more so in the BB League, parts of the world not loading properly or not being loaded at all for brief moments, something not uncommon in main game Scarlet and Violet. The deeper part of Area Zero is okay. The only thing that seemed like something new and interesting we haven't seen before is the crystal tree, which doesn't even do anything. The final chamber has the RGB 000 floors, and when I say that, I don't mean it just looks like perfect black, I mean it straight up is RGB 000. All the color values are set to 0. Did they not have enough time to make the floor texture before it's shipped, and so they just hit it with a paint bucket fill tool with black? I find this both really amusing and really sad that this is the product the highest grossing media IP is selling. The rest of the room is just pretty standard Area Zero stuff. The characters themselves, just like with main game Scarlet and Violet, I think look pretty good. You can see the individual stitches on clothes on the main trainers, which I find really surprising that all the trainers and ads around the world look so detailed, whereas the actual world looks like this. The character designs themselves are charming and iconic, as it often is with Pokemon, though if I had to choose somebody to be the most forgettable in their design, it'd be Briar. Out of the characters with designs unique to them, so characters like the Caretaker don't count. Also, when I was going through the full OST for this video, I believe it was on the Elite Four battle theme that I saw a comment about how Crispin's character gets hard carried by his pan, which cracks me up. The League Challenge in this game is by far the visually weakest out of any gym or League Challenge of any Pokemon game before, I'd argue. Lacey's challenge is a quiz, in which you step out into a field and she points at the Pokemon she's quizzing you on. Now let's compare this to the last time a Pokemon game hit us with this type of quiz, Blaine's gym in Pokemon Let's Go. Blaine set up his gym as a quiz show, but seemingly only recently, or without the most experience in doing it, considering there's plastic fold-out chairs for the audience. That's one guy in the crowd even says Blaine's not good as an EMC. His setup is a bit haphazard, but there's still a few people in the audience since it's not like there's much other entertainment on Cinnabar Island. Blaine's done his best to theme his quiz show here, with his face and moving stash behind the podium. He even Blained up the iconic gym statues. When you answer a question right, he'll jump into the shot and do a dance, and you'll get a Blaine doll to signify your points. Answer a question wrong, and there'll be a trainer revealed behind the curtain for you to battle. Blaine might not be the best at hosting a quiz show, but he's clearly passionate about it and giving it his best go and has fun doing it. And that's reflected in the setting we find ourselves in. In Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, we're in some random field there was space to do this minigame in. That's it. There's no even attempt at theming it. There's nobody but Lacey and the Pokemon you're being quizzed on. It just completely lacks any charm. How did we go from this to this? Sure, she's a student at an academy putting this together as part of a club. I'm sure the club budget isn't exactly high, but then throw something together even more haphazardly than Blaine, or incorporate other club members in some way, like holding up points cards. Crispin's League Challenge. This one incorporates other trainers because it has to for ingredient trading. But it too is just some random outdoor area that doesn't even have anything to do with his fire types, or cooking honestly. Even when doing super basic puzzles, Pokemon gyms have always had some sort of theming around them. Again, these are students of a club and wouldn't have any crazy budget, but you can still reflect that with them trying their best to make a cool League experience. Have some flame cardboard cutouts here and there, for example. Just have them do something for their League Challenge area. Amiris and Drayton, there's genuinely nothing to say about the areas for their challenges. One sends you to fly through a nearby tutorial course, and the other tells you in the kindest way possible to fuck off and come back when you have a team of Terrarium Pokemon. So there's not really anything to mention about their challenge areas, since they don't really have challenge areas. And all these league battles have in common that their actual battlefield is just Minecraft, I guess. I don't know. The battlefield on top of the BB League is kind of cool, at least. Rooms like dorms or the cafeteria may have a bit of a new coat of paint to them, but are still the exact same layout as the ones we've been at on the other side of the planet. I guess some architectural genius just designed rooms so perfectly that all these countries couldn't help but always design everything the exact same way.
I gotta tell you, it was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
The performance here is once again very poor. We beat what the heck? We beat Fire Emblem Huh? Pokemon still pop in around you and will subject you to the Scarlet and Violet random encounters. Odd. Strange days. No, Dunsparce! Ah! Pillar jump scare! So scary! What is this camera? How do I fix this? Oh my god. Huh. Get me out of this hell. I should have battled like this anyway for fun to see what would happen. How am I down here now? No! Gosh dang it! I didn't realize I was playing Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy! Yes, I should be on a raft for this nice, pleasant stream. Oh my. No! Come on! Terastallization still unloads everything except for the subject in focus. Something you can see in full display from my walking wake battle where the camera bugged out and stayed at the standard angle, showing you how it really does these animations. Where are all the Pokemon? And the one exception was against Petulant, where the Fortnite dancers just keep on going at it in the background. Alright, in editing I realized I was actually thinking about the Nemona battle just before the Petulant battle, but it's still so goofy here. The fact that as she's throwing the Terra Orb, you're despawned, your Pokemon is despawned, and yet you have all the Fortnite dancers in the background that are still there going at it. Even Kieran's still there. Okay, so I initially had in this part how the DLC seemingly fixed one of the issues that I identified with main game Scarlet and Violet, which was these guys, where rather than raising their heels, they would just tilt back and forth for their entire model. Also ignore the eyes, that's just the way that distant NPCs would look in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. But specifically, the heel raise that's going on here is actually seemingly a heel raise in the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet DLC. I noticed when I was facing the Caretaker here, and that he actually raises his heels, rather than just tilting back and forth. But then as I started reviewing more of my footage, I noticed that there were still NPCs like this in the DLC, and NPCs that would raise their heels. And what I think it is I think it's distance to the camera, where if the camera's pretty far from the NPC, then they do the tilt back and forth. But if the camera's within a certain distance to the NPC, then they do the actual heel raise. I don't know what that distance is, and I don't know if this was something that was fixed for the DLC, like I initially thought it was when I made this video. But yeah, anyways, heels are actually raised now, sometimes. Just like in Legends Arceus before it, this game often doesn't load things until they're actually in the shot, resulting in these 1 to 2 frame flashes of everything suddenly popping into existence when the camera shot changes, which is very jarring. Wow, Applin didn't exist there for a hot second, or Diplet, whatever. Wow, did you not exist for a hot second there either? Because my hammer was... Oh my goodness! This game straight up unloads anything that's not currently on camera. Like, you can see Dipplin pop in briefly when I'm attacking here, because the hammer blocks it. Like, there's the pop-in, there's the pop-in. In Area 0, the terminal to get into the lab doesn't even load until it's needed for the cutscene. It's not a part of the environment that's already loaded like you'd think it would be. The animation for the door opening goes faster than in the main game, but it still has the same amount of frames the game goes through for this animation. Up to you which one looks more jarring. When you enter the lab, you'll find another small fix. You used to spawn above the ground, and fall down to the ground once the loading screen is through. Now, you actually spawn on the ground. Out of all the issues I outlined in the Scarlet and Violet video essay, the things that got fixed as far as I'm aware were the data leak that made the game unplayable for long sessions because they had to fix that one, audience foot movement, and the spawn position after this load zone. I mean, I'll take whatever improvements I can get, but it seems really odd to be fixing those small things and not, you know, the game world still not really functioning. And I know the game is so broken that the only way that you could truly fix it is by reworking it from the ground up, but come on, at least try from where we're at. I suppose those are much easier fixes, but maybe you should start putting band-aids on the cuts after you've patched up the gaping wounds. Okay, bye. Okay, bye. They patched up the one fatal one and pretty much called it a day. Oh, and a whole lot of other little things I didn't cover in these videos that will only be experienced by a minuscule amount of players to give the impression they're really fixing these games in their patch notes, so you should definitely come play the DLC because the game is good now. And I mean, if you check the actual patch notes, so you have the patches just shortly after release, where here's a decent few things. It's these ones that are the longer ones, where here's a whole bunch of stuff going on, like right after launch. These are the longer entries. But when you check the more recent ones, this was the release date of Hidden Treasure of Area 0 Part 1. I can't word sometimes, where there's a whole bunch of stuff added here. There was this patch that we talked about a bit earlier in the video where they fixed the fact that you just couldn't beat any more trainers past a certain point, as well as the whole you can't beat the main game unless you know the trick to cycle around your Pokemon, so that took about a month to fix. And there just hasn't been any patches since then, apart from the few minor things that came with the release of the Indigo Disk. You probably saw this earlier in the video without realizing what it was. That was a crash. So one of the clips you saw in the intro sequence compilation was this crash by Hospitality. And then the one that released with the Epilogue content where there was like a few things here. But even if it is just fixing minor things, these whole long patch notes were basically just in the very early days of the game and into the following new year for a couple months. With the DLC was obviously very, very incomplete if this video has shown you anything so far. And yet, there's basically not really that much of an effort to fix it past the things that are seen as like the most essential. Like, the game was more or less abandoned to shift workforce onto the next game, the next product to sell. So the quality they're at right now, that's the quality it's staying at forever. Oh yeah, and this video has taken me so long to make that I grew out a beard. Isn't that something? The elevator is once again the gray dimension Squidward found himself in the time travel episode until you go through a load zone. Here's a part I'm sure many people were waiting for, the glitches. There's not as much ground to cover here as in the main game Scarlet and Violet essay, as there's less content here, and a lot of the glitches are the same as in the main game, so most aren't really worth going over a second time. And there's also some that we discussed earlier where they were relevant, such as the game not tracking defeated trainers, the main game being almost unbeatable, the Walking Wake and Iron Leaves egg glitch that I don't know whether you would count that as DLC or main game, but that was soon enough after the main game that one was actually talked about in the first Scarlet and Violet essay. But there are definitely still a fair amount of glitches that I'd like to talk about here. Some of these glitches take place in the main game, but all after the release of the DLC content. I mean, maybe some already existed in the main game, but I didn't notice them until I was playing after the DLC came out, who knows. Sometimes, some models aren't supposed to be in certain cutscenes, so how does the game hide them? Unload the model? Don't be silly, they set its opacity to 0, making it see-through, and forgetting that the shadow is its own entity tied to that model, I guess. Is there an evil spirit haunting the school? The camera still doesn't really function. I know that's nothing new, but the sheer absurdity of this was so great, I felt it was worth outlining again. So that was probably a factor. Oh, great. Kirby doesn't even exist anymore. The default camera angle. You'll love to see it. Alright. This game is so stupid. Man. The default camera angle. Kirby doesn't exist, and you can't see Ho-Oh's head. I've seen a lot of glitch clips from the main game, and a lot of invisible boatmobile shitposts of the rideable dragon being invisible, but it never really happened to me much before. I swear, after these DLC updates, it started happening to me. I couldn't actually move with invisible Koraidon. It would become visible again, but I could persist in this state however long. I also found that if you interact with Koraidon in the scene with the professor at such an angle, it turns towards you and essentially puts its head into you, and then no more Koraidon. It also doesn't play the sound effect Koraidon usually does here on acknowledging you. Yeah, Koraidon is just gone, unloaded along with the sound effects tied to it, reduced to atoms. Wait, why is this and other effects tied to it like sound effects unloaded? And yet we have this issue! Pokemon like to go invisible when the game thinks something might be clipping into them, like the camera, which results in things like invisible Ho-Oh here. This will even happen at really weird times, like this Beartic doing this attack, or slap, or whatever animation it is, and popping in and out of existence, which led to the name Golden Freddy due to how spooky he was, and I used in my battle against Trayton. I figured this invisibility during clipping always applied in battles as well, considering my Tinkatong would go invisible at the default camera angle that would almost clip into the hammer, but apparently not. Maybe it's just your Pokemon and not the one you're facing? I don't know. I hope I have armed you with the knowledge and curiosity to explore your Pokemon a little more personally yourself. Sometimes, if a Pokemon is on a certain path and you're in the way, do the Pokemon have some sort of means to reroute? Nah, banish that bad boy to the Shadow Realm. If two figures are walking together, like this lady and her Swinub, if you'd like, you can block the Swinub, who just tries to push past you. Eventually, once you separate them enough, the game just gives up and banishes them both. Video games allow for emergence of different possibilities of play, something we discussed in the Games as Art essay I'd highly recommend. It's an inherent part of video games. Rather than accounting for that emergence, though, Scarlet and Violet is like, if this doesn't go according to the one specific case we programmed where everything goes as planned, then we just give up and despawn them. Which, speaking of, water is programmed very weirdly in this game. Water doesn't truly exist. Water-type Pokemon who are swimming aren't actually programmed to swim. They're programmed to fly at the elevation the water is supposed to be. If the Pokemon doesn't spawn at the exact elevation they're supposed to, or they increase their elevation by pushing up on or coming onto the land, I guess they're just flying now, which seems to be the same way they were programmed in Legends Arceus. Pokemon don't actually react to water at all. It's not there. They'll walk across land underwater as if the water doesn't exist at all. Again, the same way it was programmed in Legends Arceus. Game Freak isn't fixing their mistakes, they're repeating them. All the water is this top layer to give the illusion that there's a body of water here. And that'd be fine if there wasn't any way to break the illusion. The game doesn't let you put the camera any lower than the water elevation. Too bad the developers didn't account for the water elevation changing with the slight waves going across, which lets the camera alternate back and forth between clipping in and out of the water texture, allowing us to see firsthand how it's just normal land, with a water texture at this elevation, and water-type Pokemon flying at that elevation. There has to be some sort of detection with the top of the water for when the player and the Ride Dragon are on it, to allow them to swim. Again, the same as Legends Arceus. There's nothing inherently wrong with this system. They do say work smarter, not harder, but this system needs to actually work. If Pokemon treat the water no differently than land and can just become a tactical submersible whenever they please, the water-type Pokemon who are flying can just begin flying over land, and the player can move the camera down and immediately break the illusion, that's a problem. This was one from the main game, where climbing just didn't work properly, but I felt like I encountered the issue a lot more in the DLC. I'm down here now. Here's another one that would have been from the main game, but I only realized as of the DLC when I changed my hair to other options. Turns out the physics on it are pretty wacky. Another one from the main game, but it's so ridiculous and still isn't fixed that I wanted to bring it up again. Randomly spawning items can still spawn in inaccessible spots, like load zones. You try to get this item, it'll just pull you into the load zone. It's impossible to pick up. It even spawns in the cutscene. I was curious and looked up other playthroughs at this section, and sure enough, across the other playthroughs, I saw this item spawned in the exact position. It's either hard-coded or seeded in such a way that this inaccessible item will always be here at this time. Sometimes distantly loaded Pokemon drink way too much coffee and get really weird.
Hey, Harry, how many coffees have you had?
Yeah, I know what you're thinking. Did I have 6 shots, or only 5? Well...
Okay, you've had enough.
No idea what triggers this, but it just seems to happen from time to time, and is fixed when you get within a certain distance of the Pokemon in question, and remains fixed even if you exit that radius again. Oh, and I guess I'm just gonna dub over this shitpost when I just had the music playing on its own before, because it turns out if I just leave the music playing on its own before, then I get immediately copyright claimed. So hopefully by me talking a whole bunch here, that is going to prevent that happening, and you can still enjoy the Pokemon shaking like they're on so much coffee that it's unbelievable. Yeah, it's a little bit crazy, isn't it? Another from the main game, but randomly sliding and falling still happens sometimes, and it's just so silly I wanted to bring it up again and have an excuse to show these clips. Don't know what this counts as, but here's a section with no grass. It just suddenly cuts off in these exact lines, so not really a glitch, but just weird. And of course the lag. This game still gets quite a bit of slowdown at times. Alright, now for some fun ones I didn't encounter in my playthrough, but have seen circulating around online. Let's start with my personal favorite one. When Okidogi uses knockoff, it moves backwards, but it doesn't come back to its standard battle position. This means if you keep on using this move, you'll get farther and farther and farther back with seemingly no cap. In the glitch compilation at the beginning of this video, there was only one clip that is only theoretically possible rather than something that was done legitimately. The player cheated to make all Pokemon take 0 damage, allowing knockoff to be used over and over and over again without the battle ending. Ultimately, seeing Okidogi in the Voidlands here using a Hyper Beam in one of the most ridiculous Pokemon clips I think I've ever seen. The Indigo Disk introduced a new Pokemon and item duping method that lasted for a while before it too got patched, I believe. Players would get a Smeargle near some tree, have its sketch transform into the Pokemon with the item you want duped, run, and now that Pokemon exists in the world with that item, stuck to the tree. You can steal that item and run away from battle as many times as you'd like. You can also catch the Pokemon itself if you'd like. This was something we talked about earlier in the video, but before Stellar Type came out, cheaters were soft-locking other players in online matches by terastallizing Ogerpon into it after the release of the Teal Mask. Here's a clip with a mysterious black hole that would have no doubt caused many playground discussions many years ago. I feel like after the DLCs dropped, I started seeing way more clips of picnics not quite working properly, and in some ways I hadn't seen before, like the table not loading. Here's that one of the moon flying across the sky from the intro, which is just... what even? Turns out, there's also ways to get the camera fixed, but the game doesn't think it's fixed. This means as you turn the camera, you can see the game unloading stuff it thinks you're not looking at, and loading stuff when it thinks you are. This whole rabbit hole by Sabuna switch actually went deep in what this all led to. There were 13 clips in this thread. Sometimes Pokemon sent out in auto battle mode will just run off to who knows where, going so far they unload. If any Pokemon is considered as floating or flying in the Synchro Machine and you go off a ledge, they'll just slowly plummet as you move and otherwise will stay still, which leads to ridiculous looking shots like this. As much as I hate having TikTok watermarks on the screen, I wanted to share this one because how the heck does this even happen? There were a decent more combinations of things that, when done, will crash the game that released. Multiplayer is still, well, Scarlet and Violet multiplayer. Sometimes in these video essays, I'll talk about the overall aesthetic experience and feel I got from the game. Well, pretty much the same as Scarlet and Violet. A buggy, unfinished mess that needed a lot more time, and is a complete joke to be charging a marked up price for. For the soundtrack discussion, we're just going to focus on the key themes of each of these DLCs. The Kitakami theme is a nice, relaxing piece with a different feel to that of mainland Paldea. It also sits nicely in my autumn stream playlist. Following suit to the main game, the Kitakami Battle theme uses the same leitmotif as the area theme, but remixes it into a more intense battle-like version. The Fearsome Ogre Folktale theme uses this same leitmotif as well. Same goes with the Kitakami Hall theme. The use of this same melody in different themes and contexts is always something I love to see in game soundtracks. And the theme takes on different tones as we continue to progress the story. Then we hear this theme take its final form in the battle against Ogerpon. Carmine's battle theme I thought was alright, but didn't feel like there was any one particular part that I felt defined the theme. To me, it all just felt kind of samey, even though it's doing different things. Take, for example, Zinnia's theme. I think of that theme, and this is the first thing that comes to mind. Take Primal Dialga's theme. I think of that, and this is the first thing that comes to mind. Or take a more recent example, Marnie's battle theme. These themes have key parts that really take center stage when they come in, and are the key identifying features of the theme. Carmine's theme, I feel like I'm waiting for that, but never really reach it. Or maybe we reach that, but it just doesn't quite land the same. This was not a battle theme I remembered after playing. If you asked me what Carmine's battle theme sounded like, I wouldn't be able to tell you. Kieran's battle theme, on the other hand, I feel does not have this problem. When this theme focuses on its key parts, it makes sure you know it. And when we face him for the final battle of the Teal Mask, we see the electric guitar taking center stage as we hear what is still the same theme, but now with these new instruments matching Kieran's levels of frustration. The Loyal 3 theme is just this short little loop that I normally wouldn't talk about because of how short it is, but considering it's their theme that is later remixed in their battle theme, and it's an important part in their cutscene, I felt it was worth discussing. And I find it kind of funny how these resurrected 3, who are potentially on a mission to murder the one who murdered them, just have this theme of some pesky troublemakers. The Loyal 3's battle theme. I'm personally not the biggest fan of electronic kind of music, but it mixes in real instruments pretty well for a nice blend. Not quite the kind of theme I would have expected in these battles, but it works well and goes pretty hard at times. Not my personal favorite if I'm being honest, but I get why people like it. Perrin's theme sounds like something you'd hear in a beach-themed area of Generation 4, and honestly, maybe Gen 4 was the vibes they were intentionally going for here, considering, you know, and I'm all for it. Then there's music that's good because it was just yoinked from Legends Arceus. Now for the Indigo Disk, prepare for a lot of Gen 5 remixes. Blueberry Academy is definitely a pretty catchy tune, though again, the more electronic style of music just isn't quite my cup of tea. It sounds like something you'd hear in Bomberman. Something I appreciated about the original Black and White soundtrack was how it was sort of electronic, but still orchestral sounding. It was electronic-y orchestral. Maybe I could actually describe that better had I studied music and not game design in university. The Indigo Disk goes in a lot harder to the electronic kind of sounds like you'd hear countless YouTube remixers doing, and I'm honestly not the biggest fan of. But then the emphasis on the guitar, now that hits. And then factoring in the Blueberry Academy theme, now that's a nice touch. The BB Academy dorm uses the same leitmotif as the BB Academy, but is a lot more chill of a theme. The Terrarium remixes one of the mainline Scarlet and Violet exploration themes, while also putting in a bit of that Area Zero leitmotif. While generally following the same tune, it takes completely different styles across the different biomes. Each biome also uses Generation 5 leitmotifs, except the choice of ones to use is very odd. There are 5 Terrarium themes in this game: the Savannah biome, the Coastal biome, the Canyon biome, Polar biome, and the Plaza biome, which is essentially just like the center area connecting them all. At about the minute 24 mark, every single one of these themes transitions into the Black and White Route 6 theme. Then at about the minute 37 mark, Coastal Biome transitions into Driftvale City, Polar Biome transitions into Opelucid City, and Savannah, Canyon, and Plaza all transition into Route 2. Wait, so why do Coastal and Polar have the privilege of having a theme given uniquely to them, and Savannah, Canyon, and Plaza, over half of the other themes, all just use the same one thing? Why? Coastal and Polar get privileges of getting Driftvale and Opelucid City, but everything else? Let's just give everything else Route 2, who cares? It also seems strange to be giving everything Route 6. Like, it's not even that important of a route in Black and White. Maybe it just transitioned into these other themes really well? In Pokemon Black and White, the only significant thing that takes place or is present on Route 6 is the Season Lab. Because Black and White was the game that brought in different seasons for every 1 month that passed in real life. And the Season Lab is where scientists were investigating this and being like, Deerling are changing with the seasons. Aren't seasons cool? Whoa, stuff is changing. So it is possible that they went for Route 6 in the Terrarium theme because the different regions of the Terrarium could be like the different seasons of Unova, and they were trying to make that kind of connection. Driftvale is always just a banger, you can never go wrong with that. And Opelucid works pretty well in the Polar Biome theme. Even if Opelucid is not remotely a polar city. And then from there, everyone else gets Route 2 because fuck it. As for the wild Pokemon battle theme, we see a similar situation of a more electronic emphasis, probably intended to make it feel closer to the original it's based on, but I feel just makes it feel more distant from. The other version of the wild battle theme does however factor in both the Area Zero and Terrapagos leitmotif at points. It does make me wonder why there's two different wild battle themes. I didn't do enough wild Pokemon battles, or was otherwise distracted at the time to hear the different ones if they would have both played during my playthrough. The Elite Four I incorrectly called gym leaders earlier in the video. Interestingly enough, this doesn't seem to be a Gen 5 remix of Elite Four, or Gym Leader as far as I can tell, but a new original theme. I mean, it works to set the tone of an intense battle, but if I decide to be a bit of a controversial Carl here, it just feels like generic intense battle noise to me. Ask me to hum this out 5 minutes from now and there's a 0% chance I'd remember. It does get a bit more reflectively epic towards the end, at least. Kieran's battle theme went from battling this goofy kid companion who you were adventuring with who was just so happy to have a friend, into a theme befitting someone who, through adversity, rose to the top you are now facing down to claim the title of. I do love me some well-done orchestral rock, and this theme does not disappoint. As we reach the depths of Area Zero, we use the same Area Zero theme in a new way, with a greater feeling of mysteriosity, is that a word? As we draw ever closer to the core of this whole area. I want to wait before starting the Kieran and Terrapagos battle theme because the start will be fast and I want to describe it before playing it, because it actually has a very interesting lead. Kieran has two completely different battle themes across the DLCs, the Teal Mask battle theme and the Indigo Disk battle theme. This theme actually leads with the Teal Mask Kieran battle theme, the music's way of telling you that he has in fact somewhat returned to his old mentality, where he has more hope for him being that special character he wanted himself to be, and that's reflected in his behavior. But we don't hear that theme for long. Instead, it becomes warped, out of tune, and suddenly morphs and is overshadowed by the Terrapagos theme, as if it seized control. Have a listen. The theme then takes a bit more of a reflective final battle stance. As we begin the battle with Terrapagos at its true might, we now lead with the Area 0 theme, which leads a lot more naturally into Terrapagos' theme than Kieran's did. The end credits theme, I thought, like the main game, I wouldn't be able to play for this video because I'd immediately get copyright claimed, but the finale part of my playthrough isn't demonetized, so I assume this Sheeran remix is okay for YouTube? Hopefully I don't get demonetized like a month from now just out of the blue. But yeah, this theme is Ed Sheeran again. It's a remix of Celestial, the theme from the main game credits. It has some Area 0 mixed in there, and the main Scarlet and Violet theme. It's actually a pretty good remix, honestly. If you'd like to hear the entire theme, I may have thrown together a little something at the end of the video with this as the soundtrack. All in all, the soundtrack is really pretty good. Even if the quality of mainline Pokemon titles is, well, what it's been for the past several years, at least we can take solace in knowing that the music will always slap. You can take away our playability, but you can never take away our music. I don't think I've ever played a mainline Pokemon game without a good soundtrack. I think if I had to pick out a favorite, it would be the Terrapagos battle theme. The hidden treasure of Area Zero honestly did have some really awesome things going on. A new character who I'd argue is one of the best in the series, even if it feels like his full storytelling potential was untapped, an amazing soundtrack, a brief campaign based in double battles, and some brief glimpses of what would have been a far better game. But it's just so Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. The plot is all over the place. It doesn't feel like characters undergoing a natural path that ultimately leads to a destination, but rather being corralled along a specific path to ensure they get to the specific destination the writers intend, even if that path doesn't make sense. It feels artificial. The most interesting thing they've done with a mainline Pokemon character in years feels like he's missing a crucial last arc, which can lead players to misinterpret the lesson of his story as give up on your dreams, or ignore the lesson completely because the player is taught they'll always be the special snowflake. The game runs about as well as I'd imagine programming a digital toaster to play Doom would, to the point that some side quests and even the main game was essentially unbeatable for a time if you met the super niche and specific prerequisites of battling a lot of people or having a decently sized party. How that didn't cause more backlash baffles me. The world is bland and uninteresting. The one place that would have been genuinely interesting has the interesting part hidden behind a curtain, so you just have to believe the game that it's interesting. And of course, we can't forget the predatory business practices of Switch-era Pokemon. Battling or trading with others? Only if you have the exact same game. Want to manage your Pokemon across games, or manage Pokemon not available in the game you're playing right now, or trade with people who might not have the same game? That'll be a $22 a year subscription service. That's almost as much as it costs to use Nintendo's barely functional online service in the first place. We're sorry about the quality this game released at, and are offering refunds for any players not satisfied with our product. We're going to do our best to fix this, or at least make it look like we are. Anyway, would you be at all interested in purchasing our DLC that isn't shipping finished either? We've generously marked up by $5. Whether you want to or not, and whether you actually do purchase or not, we're going to remind you about this anytime you open your menu ever again. There really isn't a better way to describe this than predatory. There exists such brand strength and loyalty that you can ship out an unfinished game, start charging more for things, start charging for things that used to be built into the cost of the game, ship out worse versions of already existing games, and always reliably turn a profit. I'd claimed at the end of my first mainline Pokemon essay that I felt a problem was fan demand for new titles, a view I changed my mind on during the years since. The early days of the Switch saw a lot of demand for Pokemon. Switch Year 1 saw Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon on the 3DS, Year 2 saw the Let's Go titles, and then Sword and Shield finally released during Year 3. There was a lot of fan demand at the time for new Pokemon titles on the Switch, as there were a couple of years before the mainline game of Gen 8 people expected, which made it easy to think that it was one of the causes of games coming out in the state they have been. Years later, without major outcry for new titles ASAP anymore, and games are coming out some of the fastest they ever have, especially when you consider these as actual new titles and not enhanced third versions that helped Pokemon regularly pump out games previously. Even without any major fan demand for new titles as soon as possible, we had 3 mainline games released in a 1-year span. What other AAA studio does something like that? But every game sold like crazy, so there is no need to pump the brakes, regardless of what general online discourse happens to be. Until Pal World came out. I don't actually have much time in that game, just about 8 hours on Steam, and I only streamed it once just to check it out since with my game schedule I don't have a ton of wiggle room to add new things. So my personal experience with the game is pretty shallow, but it ended up having a lot of appeal for a lot of players. Pokemon mechanics, survival game like Ark without needing to give up like your entire hard drive to the Ark storage gods, micromanagement simulation, being actively updated by the team with promise of free content updates in the future, some of which have already been delivered by now, and being significantly cheaper than modern Pokemon, which led to a lot of people playing it and it's snowballing. Palworld has sold over 25 million units. For comparison, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet sold just about 25 million units. Despite what people claim, there never has been a Pokemon killer game, and most likely never will be a Pokemon killer for the foreseeable future. It's not like Palworld was a runaway success while Pokemon Scarlet and Violet flopped. They were both pretty equally successful sales-wise, though you could argue there are more players of Palworld out there than Scarlet and Violet, what with the whole two versions of Pokemon thing where many players buy both. And worth noting that unlike Pokemon, Palworld shipped out with no brand recognition, apart from memes as the Pokemon with Guns game. If Pokemon shipped out another new game immediately after the DLC for Scarlet and Violet was done, I have no doubt it would have been successful too. But a company's goal is typically to maximize profit, and Palworld was successful enough to presumably make the Pokemon company think, is that 25 million units we could have sold? Scarlet and Violet selling 25 million units is already insane success within the gaming industry. Like I've mentioned before, I see massive games that celebrate hitting 1 million. It's not like Pokemon would stop being profitable by continuing on with its current trends, but maybe the Pokemon company recognizes that things could be even more profitable if they change up their development formula. Palworld has shown there is an incredibly strong demand for creature-catching video games that Pokemon is not satisfying right now. So how do we get these players' interest back to our product? Pokemon actually decided to take an extra year in development of their next title, Pokémon Legends Z-A, releasing in 2025. With Scarlet and Violet DLC releasing in 2023, people expected the next title to release the following year in 2024. And who knows, maybe that was the plan at one point and Palworld convinced them to bake their game a bit longer and regain the lost faith of so many of their players. Or maybe there's no interest in regaining player faith and this is just the development schedule that had already been planned for years. Maybe development of Legends Z-A didn't start as soon as we thought, and so this will ultimately end up being the same development time as other recently released titles. Whatever the truth, the general consensus from players seems to be that there is 1 extra year of development time tacked onto this product. Now, is that going to be the game is already completely finished, let's just take an extra year for polish to be safe, like Tears of the Kingdom saw? I doubt it. Looking at a game like Scarlet and Violet, which used pretty much every optimization trick in the book and still ran like crap, it doesn't matter how many years of fixing that you take. If you want to fix it, you would have to rework it from the ground up. Otherwise, you're just adding band-aids that do help, but doesn't fix the core problems. If in 2022, Scarlet and Violet was in the state it was in, and then, rather than releasing, they took an extra year to fix it, that 1 year would have made a difference, sure, but not significantly so with how broken it was at its core. If Scarlet and Violet did take an extra year and release in 2023, well then maybe it'd just look like it looks now in 2024, which is still not anything to brag about. I'm not at all trying to say that taking more time is a bad thing. Obviously, it's good. I'm only trying to say it's possible that with only 1 extra year tacked on, it might not make a night and day difference like a lot of people seem to be expecting. I do genuinely hope that Legends Z-A underwent stronger development from the beginning, that extra year is being put into a strong foundation rather than a halfway toppled Jenga tower. This game isn't coming out as soon as possible. This game isn't having unfinished gameplay shown off right at the reveal and then regularly all the way through to release. It's taking longer and being kept under wraps until they have the game in a state worth showing, something I've been wanting for years. It's funny, most games you get any news on them or hear it's coming out sooner and fans are hyped, whereas with Pokemon now, fans are hyped when they hear Game Freak is taking more time. And more Pokemon fans than ever are expressing a willingness to wait if it means getting a better quality product. A lot of fans, at least. Some still get upsetty spaghetti at events like the World Championships when news on their mobile games are revealed, but there's no new news on Legends Z-A. Remember when I said my mind was changed about fan outcry for new titles not being responsible for release schedules? Yeah, let's please keep it that way and not badger them for news and new titles constantly and signal to them that that's what players want. If we continue on the current path where it seems like they want to start taking more time, then that's a good thing. Maybe the next title will have even more time taken for it. Maybe they'll get other studios to develop games who are also given more time, and who have actually developed a full video game before. For now, only time will tell. As for the DLC of Scarlet and Violet, while it had some cool things going for it, it ultimately released at the quality of one last wet fart at the end of the stream that was Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. It's not worth the cost of entry. It's not even worth the pre-marked up cost of entry. For Scarlet and Violet plus DLC at $125 Canadian, there are so many better games you can buy collectively. In my opinion, all that's worth checking out for the DLC is Kieran's story, I hope you were able to enjoy as part of this video, and the soundtrack that I'd recommend just looking up on YouTube. Then you experience the two best parts of the DLC anyway. All we can hope with this DLC is that this is a slightly more hopeful closure to a dark age of Pokemon, which now opens the door to a bright new era. I mean, who am I kidding? I wouldn't be surprised if it was just Legends Arceus again next year. But now at the end, I do want to apologize that this video took so long. I've been working on the script for this since the Teal Mask first launched, and I've been working on this video since December 2023. The Scarlet and Violet essay took me the longest out of any video essay to make before it, at 7 months. Well, now this one has taken me longer, although less hours put into it admittedly. Across having been in my final semester of university and just graduating a few months ago, a decent bit of time traveling, my other channel projects, my other life projects, and of course working because I can't live off of the crumbs I get here, I haven't really had a massive ton of free time. And when I do, I'm often trying to get caught up on my game queue I always seem to be behind on, as new things I want to cover on the channel keep coming out faster than I can get through the old stuff. I can't wait for the Xenoblade Chronicles 3 video essay to come out in 50 years from now, and then people are like, oh, everyone loved it in the beginning, it's only years later people decide it's not good. Like, no, I actually had no time to make it until whenever it eventually gets made. I don't know how many people even still care about the Scarlet and Violet DLC now that all the focus seems to be on Legends Z-A. The Scarlet and Violet DLC was just a weird dream at this point, right? But this was a project I'd started and fully intended to see through, no matter how many months it took. Anybody who may be tuning into this, I thank you for your patience. Maybe one of these days I should start doing more short-form video essays again, even if they never perform all that well. Much like Kieran, my dreams of seeing this project through didn't exactly pan out as I expected, but I'm still happy with the result, and will continue on into the uncertain future. I've always got something cooking up around here, whatever it turns out to be, and if you want to come along, I'd be glad to have you, and if not, then I appreciate you joining this adventure. What? No! Dude, how did they ship this?
I get stuck, world's too loud. Things don't look up when you're going down. Know your arms are reaching out from somewhere beyond the clouds. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. I get stuck. I get stuck. Rinse and repeat. Rinse and repeat. I get stuck. I get stuck.
And then I'll get enough of this over here. the game speed being tied to the frame rate is screwing with me as the game speed continues to change. And then, what? No, fly! What? Fly! Oh, you've actually got to be kidding me right now.
I see the light shining through the rain. 1,000 colors in a brighter shade. Needing to rise from the lowest place. There's silver lining that surrounds the gray. When I get lost, come back around. Things don't look up when you're going down. Know your arms are reaching out somewhere beyond the clouds. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. When I get lost, when I get lost, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. I get stuck, I get stuck. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. Come back round, come back round. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. I get stuck, I get stuck.
Oh. Once again, there's no sound effect. I got you to turn to me, but you fool. You've fallen right into my trap. Now you've been banished to the Shadow Realm. That might have been funny if I didn't have hiccups.
See tonight, it could go either way. Hearts balanced on a razor blade. We are designed to love and break, and to rinse and repeat it all again. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. When I get lost, when I get lost, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. I get stuck, I get stuck. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. Come back round, come back round. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. I get stuck, I get stuck. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. When I get lost, when I get lost. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. I get stuck, I get stuck. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. Come back round, come back round. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. I get stuck, I get stuck.